like by design. I mean, essentially, oscillatory synchrony is energetically cheap. Exactly the same principle for like why soap bubbles become spherical, because when they're not spherical, they're going to be wobbling and they will be radiating energy around them. So like they will fall into their local energy minima. Gestalts are local energy minima because they're resonant configurations. But again, they're nonlinear resonant configurations. And to
Yeah, I mean, just Luke Ford and the dangers of e-personality. And he's an introvert, incel or whatever. And when he comes out on the internet, he has this, like the dark side of his subconscious becomes conscious. I mean, to me, it's obvious. It's what happens. It's what's happening to you on the same way. But your unconscious, your subconscious is different than Gandalf's subconscious.
Logic and science dictate that not only consciousness doesn't exist, consciousness is in fact scientifically impossible. And yes, it is going to involve math and calculus and science and computer programming. I'm sorry. And have different implications of the process. What's the connection between the levels of a person's soul and how it reincarnates?
But I'm not going to spur on the issue because I'm not a woman. It's not my issue.
About how one day you're going to fulfill the Canadian dream or the American dream. So you watch Seinfeld and say, I could do it. I'm going to go out tomorrow and go to work and have a great day, and I'm going to be successful. And one day I'm going to have my own apartment. I'm going to have my own parties with my own friends over, and I'm going to have my own possessions. I'm going to see things that I want and just buy them.
Yeah, but that's just so to say, a worthless opinion of yours.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Week in Review with the one and only Doooovid, the show you've all been waiting to watch again ever since it last ended. I'll hand it over to my epic co-host, Doooovid, for the introductions. Thank you so much for being here with us today. You're still muted there, Doovid. You got to unmute. Doovid's working with the new setup there. He's got his...
Yeah, great. Good to be back.
Mac computer. I'll full screen you right away. How's that sound? It looks a little boomer tech when you've got the actual white background YouTube, the show we're in right now, but otherwise it's great.
Okay, so just going to do my week in review of links to share right at the beginning so I could log off the one computer that I have my mouse, and maybe we'll figure a better way off to do it. I was just watching today, CNN had this rabbi I know, Rabbi Blake, the chief rabbi of Ukraine. I remember when I was in Israel, I had prayed many times. At that time, he was just a minor rabbi in Ukraine, and later became appointed to the chief rabbi of Ukraine, and actually still comes to Detroit most years fundraising, and God forbid, kind of propaganda, anti-Russian propaganda, but it is what it is. At least he was on CNN. Pray for people in Ukraine. Rabbi Blake, God bless him. So I got another guest. Thank God, this person calls herself River. She says she watches Week in Review. Reached out to me to join like a chat group or whatever, and it ends up she's got a friend in India that is a professor.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and he's written a book. I have his book here on common prophets. I'll be speaking to him on Thursday morning about similarities between the Vedas and the biblical scriptures. So look forward to that Thursday morning, 9:30 Eastern time. I guess that'll be 9 p.m. Indian time. Oops, sorry. Closed down the wrong link. Okay, so I'll show you his YouTube page in a second also. So you just some interesting stuff on Ukraine. This was like a military page called Task and Purpose, and it was kind of showing a military strategy, kind of the Russian method of going about their military campaigns. So anyone interested in a more technical understanding of the Russian military strategy, check that out. Here's actually a map called the live conflict map, and it has God forbid you could see the map of the Ukraine, and then you could click on the little icons, and it'll tell you what's happening, and even show you links to like videos of God forbid various things happening in military actions all over the world. But here you can see in Ukraine all sorts of stuff happening, and I found that from the last page I shared. Here was a random video from Brandeis University on weed in Judaism and Israel, history of weed culture in Palestine, Israel, ethnic, class, and gendered perspectives. So learn all about the role that marijuana has played in Israel and Palestine. Here's the webpage of Dr. Bharat Janjulwala, who I'll be speaking with Thursday, and you can see some of his videos on similarities between biblical and Hindu history. And he's got an article, like he mentioned, like Jennifer, that he's had a hard time publishing. He's been turned down from a lot of journals. This is one thing that he was able to get into academia, and so his book, hopefully we'll talk about this more. He talks about what he will call the same person. He will say, is Krishna and Moses the same person? Which is kind of like a Hindu type way of expressing things, to say like, no, literally the same person, like an archetype, but he would express that in the same, saying the same person. And then, here, so he kind of academically talks about how do you go about showing similar histories, parallels between traditions, and so hopefully maybe we'll talk about that more. But Thursday I'll be speaking with him. So Arnab Goswami, been ratcheting up the hype this week with talking about the war, God forbid, to Ukraine, Russia, and questioning what role India should be, and the role of the West. So we're talking big.
If people think that their debates are dumpster fires, you should check out some of these Arnab Goswami debates, especially when he's got like 8 people going at it. Like, this was bad. I mean, this had a girl, the one you sent me this week. You notice that girl who was fake on the phone the entire time? Like, what was that?
Yeah, and he might even be live right now, and they're at it. That there's a lot of Indians in Ukraine, and so if you see the Indian coverage, you say India abstained in the UN vote, and so maybe we probably won't end up talking that much about this on Week in Review. I just thought I'd share a few links. So Lowell at it with Root and Branch, and he had back Professor Gerald Schroeder, author of Genesis and the Big Bang, the MIT physicist, who me and Jennifer spoke with when we were on working terms with Lowell. And you're not getting too many viewers, but it was semi-interesting, 30 minutes or so. Also related to the Ukraine, this is the big thing going around. Even like Destiny was trying to refute this, and it's got millions of views recently. This is John Mearsheimer, professor at University of Chicago. We'll see maybe if Gandalf shows up or something, wants to talk about the Ukraine. But 2015, Mearsheimer kind of pointed out the problems in the U.S. Foreign policy that was likely escalating this conflict in Ukraine that has led up to the war, and it's got millions of views now because, I want to call it like prophetic, but people are understanding what's going on, and so this professor predicted it. Israel had their Cybertech summit in Tel Aviv this week, including the prime minister and Netanyahu spoke, a lot of big names. Cybersecurity is a big deal in Israel. And actually, it also plays a role in Ukraine that the biggest base outside of Israel's cybersecurity business is actually in Ukraine, possibly mostly for cheap labor. That Israel needs labor, and they've set up in Ukraine. And Israel has a hard time getting labor in various like Haredi or Arab, so they've been setting up using large amounts of employment in Ukraine. That could be coming to an end. So the prime minister and Netanyahu were speaking about it, and just general people are interested in cybersecurity. Check that out. That's probably from the biggest things happening in Israel. Here is the Royal Society this week, a video on quantum machines. So good, the Royal Society talking about quantum computing. It's a hot topic these days, and here, this page Wendover, I've shared it before, is an interesting video. Why everywhere in the U.S. is starting to look the same, and really, it's not just everywhere in the U.S. It's everywhere in the world. And it talk about like zoning and the building of cities, and just why do urban areas all tend to look the same. And they also recently, just yesterday, made a video about the logistic problems that the Russian army is having, as the expression that they said, battles are won by infantry, wars are won by logistics. And so people want to see kind of what's happening. Okay, Shulman Victoria, John Tinkle, thanks for showing up. So God forbid, I guess this is moral outrage prophet, been making these memes, and I don't know why he's putting us with Putin. This looks like, I can't tell, like, I mean, he's got me, it looks like he's got me kind of like partially the Happy Merchant meme, but also maybe like Data from Star Trek. This one, like Jennifer, maybe is like some sort of Borg. It's like for what maybe it's like the Borg and with Putin, and like Doovid and Jennifer are like part for the Borg, but he's got me like in whiteface as the Happy Merchant meme. So God forbid that's his artistic rendering of the show.
What about the white face paint? And my theory about a sad clown, a Pavarotti aesthetic, if you will.
Yeah, tough to know. Here's another one he made with Luke Ford. I guess that's supposed to be Luke Ford there on the right, and Doovid and Putin. I don't know why he's putting Putin in all these, but so God forbid. Okay, so Rick Beato this week did another "What Makes This Song Great" and the Tears for Fears. So Everybody Wants to Rule the World was one of my favorite childhood songs. I like that movie Real Genius, and I even said I saw Jennifer kind of like that character, the female lead role character in the movie Real Genius. So great song, great chorus. So does a good job. He doesn't really focus on the hero's journey aspect or the thematics to it, more the music. But so I enjoyed that video, and I was streaming with Ralph, and I was thinking of God forbid the conflict in the Ukraine. And last week I'd mentioned maybe I'd talk about Alice in Chains, but then I thought I'd mention this song instead. 10 years after, I'd Love to Change the World, which I guess also in the last decade had.
Is that romance song from the 80s? Because I think I actually do know that one. Is it the I Would Be the Sunlight in Your Universe? Is it that one?
No, it's 1971, and it's kind of like the post-hippie, like I mentioned, like the Godward podcast, we're saying, the anti-hero. So where you had kind of classic music, and it followed the general hero's journey structure of theme, variation, dissonance to resolution, to yet a change in music structure, and music stops having happy endings. So after the hippie era, like the breakup of the Beatles, and you have the Stones taking a different direction, where people start seeing that these altruistic visions of the world aren't really going to happen. So the 10 years, yeah, Alvin Lee, 10 years after, um, it has like an echo to the song. It's an interesting song. It has a probably like a typical 3-part structure where introduction, chorus, high part, and back to the chorus with kind of like a classical guitar and led to. But the chorus is just kind of like, I'd love to change the world, but I don't know what to do. So I leave it all up to you. And so that's the chorus, and it has kind of lines where it doesn't have like a typical theme. It kind of just has words to the music, like road pollution, no solution, institution, electrocution, and then back to the chorus. I'd love to change the world, but I don't know what to do. So I leave it all up to you. So with that, I'm going to end my screen share, and I'm post this on social media. Then I'll leave to my library. So I was on Ralph, and he was mentioning, uh, yeah, I guess he's kind of taking Putin's side in this for whatever reasons, and I'm neutral. The Ahimsa principle.
Edgy. He should be careful not to cut himself on all that edge.
But yeah, I mean, I like the Ahimsa principle. So I was saying, like, wars and things like this, karmatically they make sense. God forbid, because like bad karma builds up, and conflict gets escalated. But no, I don't want to see anyone suffer on either side. I'm not looking for one side or the other to win. And then the question, like, why do people do what they do? And so it's kind of like hippie kind of vision, like like that's like people who are kind of trying to send food packages to the Ukraine or do something to help. So there's the mainstream I've mentioned, which is deterrence theory, and so unfortunately, like the mainstream practice is basically deterrence theory, and that means an escalation of force and a show of strength that is basically saying, we're going to win, and your behavior is bad, and in order to discourage you from your bad behavior, we're going to cause you increased suffering. And politics, military strategy, the mainstream strategy is usually deterrence theory, which is a form of escalation and a form of trying to punish the other party into submission. And so you have like the hippie type approach, and like even in America culture, the president, the media, it's all kind of like like, God forbid this guy's a bad guy, and he's just going to keep at it, and all your utopian views of the world are just false and aren't going to work, and therefore you have to show strength, and you have to use you have to give weapons to to the Ukraine. So that's generally, most people are taking this strategy of trying to give weapons to the Ukraine, God forbid. But then there's the other element of typical people that they really just want to be good people, and in order so they're kind of like do-gooders, and like trying to help out refugees and send food packages and not wanting to get into militarily. And so that 10 years after song is kind of like an anthem of the hippie era, and this kind of like do-gooder spirit that would be considered impractical. The I'd love to change the world, but I don't know what to do. So I leave it all up to you. And it also has kind of that, God forbid, dissonance, where where it's saying like, I recognize that I'm not really going to be able to change the world, and what I'm doing is kind of just utopian virtue signaling, so that so I leave it all up to you. So these sentimental spirits about wanting to change the world don't really work, and you really end up leaving it to the other people, and that could be God forbid the deterrence theory that okay, like I'm trying to help and be a good person and minimize conflict. However, I know that's not really going to work, and so I leave it all up to you, knowing that the mainstream strategy is deterrence theory. That's a form of escalation, God forbid. So if that, welcome to Week in Review. Yeah, so moral outrage prophet, I was showing your things. So I don't know if you took my read where if you kind of have me like as Data from Star Trek or the Happy Merchant meme or whatever you're trying to show. So I'm gonna head over to my library and I'll let Jennifer give her Week in Review.
Thanks, Doooovid. Always appreciate the hear what's going on and what seems important for you this week. Moral outrage prophet says the meme was simply that the NPC doesn't get the tradition. All right, so all of us over analyzing it, that was all pointless because it was just a throwaway, more or less, that made up what it lacked in substance in computational complexity. I'm just displaying the ye old comments here. Gonna get that going. Don't want to beat this dead horse too much, but I am concerned that people cannot even start to say why science works, and even more sort of stunned and horrified when I hear people give wrong reasons for why science works. Like Bayesian inference, which is largely emotional gerrymandering, nonsensical, verging on nonsensical. That aside, these types of articles sort of point to maybe some type of argument about why science works, and sort of in doing that help to maybe neutralize a little bit of the toxicity coming out of the people who just, I don't know what it is, they just seem to want to use their people as a sounding board to reconcile their insecurities with their shit beliefs that they couldn't even start to evidence, let alone justify. So more or less challenged people. I don't know if that link actually worked there. Maybe it didn't. Anyway, you can look it up. It's from 2020. I went over this a bunch of times. The epic thing about this was that a rapper, I think, shared the link. Yeah, MC Hammer, I think. And obviously also it was super accurate. So that's great. Yeah, so I was trying to get people to like
MC Hammer, God forbid, Hammer Time. That was popular here in Detroit. That was the theme song for the Detroit Pistons. We used to have season tickets, and I saw MC Hammer when he came to Detroit, and I was even on stage. They took like tens of kids, that had close to the stage tickets and brought them on stage for this song, like "Please Hammer, Don't Hurt 'Em." And so interesting. He's still around. I think his career fizzled in the 90s. Hammer Go, and he had his own dance, like a little dance style.
Mm.
But at least good for him, taking science and physics more famous, more seriously in his older age. And you just mentioned, I think it's tomorrow night. Jai Devi I might go on her stream again. She's having a stream about Jesus and Sanatana Dharma, kind of looking at kind of like the Jesus as an avatar Hindu approach that is pretty common. In ISKCON, they've installed like Vishnu Tattva as an Hindu understanding of the role of Jesus. But so I might pop on that, which is also similar to the Thursday morning. Oh, this guy's more biblical, talking not so much about Jesus, but the Hebrew prophets on for the Thursday program.
You think you're going to start being a regular guest because she seems to really enjoy the social hour bit.
Well, she seems to stream for hours every day, mostly in Hindi. So, no, I'm still in her Discord, so I might be a regular every week or two per topic, and it's kind of draining to to sit there and listen to a bunch of Hindi, and like the big panels. So it's mostly waiting and listening. So, but yeah, I might keep up. I appeared on Ralph a few times this week. Mostly talking about the Ukraine. As we had Charles Moskowitz Thursday. Luke hasn't been sending me invites, although he's had um, Elliot on like all the time. But yeah, I might if I have good working relation with Jai Devi, I'll pop on her panel every once in a while, relevant topic, and I guess kind of Jesus and Hinduism is semi interesting to me. So I think I looked now. It's at 9:30 tomorrow night, so I'm not sure if that would be Tuesday morning in India. But I probably won't even share that. So if I pop on because there's such a big panel and mostly in Hindi, I probably won't even share that. It probably wouldn't be that interesting to this crowd to watch because it's going to be majority Hindi.
Well, I suppose it depends on the topic. A lot of it just seemed to be, to me, that's social hour. I'm not saying it's bad. But yeah, waiting to talk without knowing what I guess I don't know where's the conversation supposed to be going on a show like that. No big deal. We'll probably never be invited. So nothing to worry about. And I just occasionally, Google words like panpsychism. And this happened to come up. Professor Clink. Anyway, it was interesting. I missed it. I found it 2 days after it happened, but he's got some interesting ideas out there. Oh, this is not his. Here we go. That's another one. Here we go. This is the one I sent you, Doovid. I was thinking it might be interesting to reach out to him as a means of publishing the actual meat of my theory versus what we talked about with Jason there that would have just been more on the side of just the chemistry application. As people know, I've kind of going back and forth as to what the best way to move forward with regards to publishing my quote findings. And at this point, I think it's better to just focus 100% on looking good on the Kurjai Mongol show.
Yeah, I mentioned to Jennifer like last week, God forbid, like saying like how to give an intro and saying like besides her bio, she give an intellectual intro, and this is what I meant. Like here, like research interest, and if you scroll down, you see he has a list of topics, and that's really all I meant. That Jennifer would give some sort of like like this is her like not she doesn't have to say where she's from or her like family, but kind of like educational employment background relevant to her science, her understanding of science, and then the areas of research or interest to her that would be somewhat like this page, and that's I don't know why it was so difficult, but really that's all I was trying to say, that she would give in her introduction some sort of list of her areas of research interest, and then maybe a sentence or two on each of them, or something like that. And really that's all I was trying to say.
Yeah, and then it turned into, me having some sort of like nervous breakdown thing because I mean, there's so much hidden stuff and what in the teachings it's just like who can even start to reveal stuff when so much
Well,
stuff is hidden. So it's like
hopefully you've
uh,
solved your dissonance. So it's like, no, I mean, like, it doesn't matter how much is hidden. You could still give, uh, like, headers areas of interest.
I agree that well, and what am I gonna say? I'm interested in these hidden topics that I can't tell you what they're called because that would violate tradition of their hiddenness. It's ridiculous. Like I'm never gonna say that even if it's true.
No, I mean, you say, like, quantum periodic table, um,
Hello, I'm Jen. My interests are the quantum periodic
reincarnation,
table.
the hard
It's
problem
like,
of consciousness. You say
okay.
these are the areas that you research and find interesting to talk about, quantum periodic table, hard problem of consciousness, neurocorrelates of consciousness, or whatever, just a short list.
It wouldn't
Uh,
be short.
well, I'm saying you say the short list relevant to the topics that you think are likely to be on the show. You don't have to say all the things that you ever think about, but your major areas of research interest that are relevant to him and his audience.
Okay. With Kurt. The issue is Kurt has a great variety of people on his show, and I agree that that advice would apply for in most cases. But with Kurt, it's like he kind of lets the guests have a lot of leeway. Have you watched many of Kurt's shows?
Yeah, I seem to watch like half of them since you mentioned, or I haven't shared him. I think maybe even before you started watching him when he had Carl Friston on, over a year ago. But um, yeah, I watch a lot of his programming. Um, I'm not really sure about him as a personality. It's more the topics that interest me, and some of the names, and so yeah, I mean, it's relatively good programming. He gets some of the bigger names in the business. I didn't never put that much thought into him. He was more interested in the topics, and I would assume that it's probably the majority of the people watching are probably like that also. They don't really care about you. They want insight onto these topics, and so you just convey yourself in an organized way. And so when you give an introduction, if you could, just say the major areas of interest, or topics that you'll be talking about.
Do the Do I have to lie? I don't want to do that. In my eyes, it's lying. I know in your eyes, it's not lying, and let's not get into that too much right now because I don't want to turn. I don't want to go into the same downward cycle as last time. This
Yeah, I mean,
has to
really,
happen.
it's just a downward spiral that just like you can't even to organize your thought, and then you have some sort of like defense mechanism that you have to use for your inability to organize your thought.
My defense mechanism about teachings being hidden intentionally and being a bad thing to share things that are supposed to be hidden teachings.
If you want
There
them
is.
hidden, just don't mention them. Like there's
Oh, that's
certain, I
what I'm
mean,
saying. It's like to state my areas of research. It's like I'm interested in this and a bunch of other stuff I can't talk about. It's like, all right, that's weird.
yeah. I mean, so if you're gonna, if you realize that what you're gonna say is gonna make yourself look weird, and you don't want to do it, so either just embrace it, you're weird, and put it out there, or and
I'm
value
attempting to
proposition.
embrace it, but
Say
I don't want to like I don't. I'm not one of those
what
people
you're
who
going to
thinks
talk
that
about. So you
my own
just say that.
eccentricities ought to be shoved in others' faces.
Yeah.
That
So just for the sake of good programming, just say the topics that you plan on talking about, and like this hidden stuff that you're not going to talk about anyways. So you need to mention that in a
well, if
sentence.
it's the root of the knowledge, I have to at least be able to reference it. It's uh,
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be bad programming. So like
well, this is where the
either you're
preparation
weird,
comes in.
and you put it either you're weird and you just put it out there, or you cover up that you're weird, and give some sort of normal acts so people could learn something
Cover
from.
up that I'm weird. I think that's outside of the domain of what's realistic. It's not about covering up that I'm weird.
Then you have
That's
like a
a
lose
lost
lose
cause. It's how normal can I seem? Where does it make sense to
you're gonna
really
have a
put the
lose lose
thrust of my normalcy for this one?
where you try to cover up that you're weird, you come across as weird anyways, and then you're not understood. So at least like if
Right.
you come across as weird and you're understood at least on a few of the issues, that then there's still a value proposition because you had information and insight to share. So it's going to come like what Jennifer, what she talked about, like I have no idea what she talked about, and like if that's you're like, "Yeah, exactly the way I wanted it," just like gonna be crap programming.
Well,
So
exactly. That's like Rasputin levels of megalomania. I don't endorse that.
yeah, so I'm trying to save you from yourself so that you could at least uh like have some clarity that you come and you're saying you're going to have a few areas, topics that you're going to talk about, and it's going to be clear that when people you are done viewing it, they're going to be Jennifer came on and she talked about these topics, or else people are going to come on and like I have no idea what the hell she said. She was on for a few hours and didn't make any sense to me, and I couldn't even tell you what the hell she was talking about.
Which is absolutely heartbreaking, but it's actually far better than someone coming away with a false sense of understanding, turning around and saying, haha, I'm an entropist now, and then completely misrepresenting it. So for me, I obviously want to come in way above Langan. I want to make Langan look like a clown. That is a minimum for me on that show. That everyone's like, ha, Jen sounds the way at worst Langan would sound if he was right. That's my absolute standard for myself. Now, the rest of it, I'm just sort of like, I want to have the maximum conveyance of teachings, but I don't want it to turn into the time I did the evolution debate, which had 500 anti-me comments, even though that probably actually did have a lot of teaching moments. It was not good for my image. So I want this Jai Mungal one to be good for my image. I.e.,
Yeah, this is
I'm
relatively.
fine. The weirdness is there, but it's contained in a corner.
The other modern day debate, T Jump, are relatively unfriendly platforms where the platform itself and the viewership are you're generally going to be against you. So this should be somewhat like of a friendly channel where a good proportion of the viewers would conceivably actually take you and your ideas seriously. And there's probably quite a bit of expertise, people who actually have put a lot of thought and have expertise in the topic you're talking about. And it's just like it's not a comedy act. Like don't try to be funny because you're going to be the joke. Don't tell jokes. Saying you're going to. I mean, you could throw in a few jokes, tell a few jokes, but don't turn yourself into the joke. And you watch it regularly. Like these are generally like the colleagues, I guess you would be seeking to have a circle of people interested in the similar topics. And if you're unsuccessful, here it probably means you're just going to be unsuccessful, period, as a streamer. I mean, okay, that modern day debate or T Jump, those were semi hostile environments, but yeah, I mean, I would say like if you don't aren't successful on Drymongle, it probably like God forbid you just wrap it up and say like streaming's not going to be for you.
Or just double down on being a failure as a streamer. I mean, it'd hardly be unprecedented. But I don't want that any more than you do. And so let's make Jai Mungal a success. And yes, Victoria, I will take you up on that. So thank you for offering. Really appreciate that. And hi to all the new viewers. Really appreciate everyone coming here to help us troubleshoot the future in the past of the present at a later time. Let's see.
Yeah, I just got all these new books. Like I've been really loading up on the books. I'm almost at 1,800 listings. eBay up to the level I could put up to $45,000 worth of stuff, 9,500 items, and I just got in thousands of new books, and I'm going to keep on getting them. I have, like keep on listing them. So, work, work, work. Um, I've also kind of given up on streaming. Like, I just don't see it going anywhere. I don't see, like, I still put a little content, and that's why I put so little content. Like, I don't really want to recruit people to hate watch me on my channel. So, if there's a handful of people that are interested in similar topics than me, uh, like I could appear on other channels here and there. I don't even share, like God forbid, like on Ralph or I don't even share that. Like Charles Moskowitz, I'm still trying to book him some people. Even that, like, yes, I'm kind of bearish on streaming, and I'm not going to wrap it up like just stop doing it. If we can review, we're still making progress on our research, even if you're not going to, publish a paper, but at least talk about science. Because if I hadn't do week in review, I'd probably
Or we'll
just get.
understand about the hidden teachings thing. I'm not even worried about that part at all. I started making notes too, and I can talk about that too. So there was some progress on that this week. But
I'm
anyway,
not
continue.
saying not negative attention. So like in the sense that I would rather have no attention than negative attention, and so if like just appearing on shows that are going to draw majority negative attention.
Do you think it's like that with I'm sorry, her name escapes me, the Sanskrit one, Hindi one?
Jaidev?
Yeah. Do you think it's not like that on that one, is it?
No, I mean I think I had almost you know only compliments, like God forbid, compared to like like Zobita or T Jump. Every comment was basically thank you, and people that come back again, and I mean, because Hinduism is my thing, so like talking about Hinduism, that's my element. That's kind of what my channel was partly about, promoting ISKCON, Hare Krishna, Harinam Sankirtan. So the program Thursday, that's me and my element. I like science and consciousness, although I don't have a background in it. So so like, yeah, I'll probably keep on working with Jai Dave. I'm in your Discord still, and I've had almost exclusively positive feedback from that.
Oh, that's perfect. That's nice to find somewhere where it is not hostile, welcoming, feels productive. Take your pick.
Yeah, I mean, they actually have the Shivaratri celebration, and I'm almost, like COVID-19 numbers are pretty low again. It's still over 1,000 cases a day here in my area, but in the U.S. it was down to less than 50,000. So if cases numbers keep on going down, uh, if they're down less than 1,000 cases a day for a few weeks, I'll probably start going back to the local temples, and maybe some IRL streaming Hinduism. But yeah, I like the consciousness. The consciousness is related to Hinduism. But say if you're going to be on platforms with mainstream scientists that have substantially bigger resumes, saying where everybody's a PhD or published or a known name in science journals. Uh, if you have positive feedback, we're great. Like that's the goal. That's why we're doing this. But yeah, I mean, if you don't get positive feedback, and like T Jump, um, I'd almost exclusively negative feedback from
It's
that.
not always bad to get negative feedback. Why did Swami say the greatest service is to help someone who cannot thank you in return?
Well, that's why I say conflict, like war in Ukraine. So that's really like me going off to war, and it's funny, like all the people, like in Ukraine, like in the war now, people seem to believe in karma. So if it's just like there is no God, there's nothing that you could do. Things are going to keep on getting worse. I'm sorry, didn't you know there's no
What do you
God?
mean they believe in karma?
Well, deterrence theory is really a form of karma, but I mean the people like like Putin's a bad guy and he has to lose, and saying like, well, according to T Jump, Putin might be a bad guy, but bad guys usually win. There was kind of the argument, like according to T Jump and his viewership, Putin should win because the bad guys usually win. And so these type issues where you're on the battlefield and people start dying, so I don't need to start battlefield posting, but like no, I mean to me, like Ralph, uh, T Jump, Luke Ford, even Charles Moskowitz is basically the battlefield, and just my dharma that I have to appear on the battlefield. And so if you're saying negative feedback, um, because it is this, you know, God forbid, dark, natural order of conflict in the material realm, and it's just a sign of my duty that, but, like, I would say, like, no, I mean, generally, it's not a positive thing. Like negative feedback is
So
not a
you
good
don't
sign.
think it was positive when I did the evolution debate and a bunch of people were super angry in the comments, but then maybe a little later on, people decide that they're a little more open than they thought to certain modifications to that theory?
Um, well, I mean, we went over this in detail. So I said you could, if you're a dissonant ideas or dissonant personality and you put yourself in front of a crowd and even 90-95% of the people disagree with you, you could still recruit people. So like modern day debate, is almost over 500,000 subs. T Jump gets thousands of views. So even if 99% of the people who view it have a negative view towards you, you could still recruit uh, tens of people. And I ran even Adam Green. I had relatively positive, even like a hostile environment like Adam Green or politically provoked to some extent. I would say like half of the comments are just like straight bad, like God forbid, Doovid, scum of the earth, and representative of the forces of evil. But I mean, considering it's a hostile environment, I get a lot of positive feedback when I speak to Adam Green. Like okay, or even like when I did the debate with Cultural Thug, people like go like even I get constant messages. People reach out to me. It's like, oh, it's really something that you try to speak to these people, and um, so I do get constant feedback, even though the majority of it is negative, but it's not like all negative. Like when I was on T Jump, there basically wasn't a single positive comment in the chat, and even the people I tried to speak to, all
That's
of them.
always like that on T Jumps.
Yeah, I mean, so even like Adam Green, like like there'll be like 10% of the comments will be like, "Oh, thanks for Doovid coming on," or like he's a likable guy, or and they'll be even so even in these relatively hostile environments, um, and I built up my channel, somewhat from Adam Green in a hostile environment and Luke Ford and Brundlefly. So certainly you could build up an audience like okay, we got 18 viewers, and so you built up followers, people who are interested in your ideas from this hostile environment where the vast majority didn't take you seriously and just looked at you in a very, God forbid, negative way. But because it was a large audience, you were able to, siphon out a handful of new viewership or a handful of eager minds that might have had some interest, and even like politically provoked in the right wing, alt right type personalities like on Destiny. So if they argue with like Destiny, he's got a liberal following, but he's got such a huge audience that you could siphon out a following of even if it's 1 out of 100 people that if 90 out of 100 are negative completely towards you, but even if you only change 1 out of 100 minds, it's big enough of an audience that you could build up your own base like that. And maybe like for battlefield posting also, like God forbid that it keeps you humble, it keeps you working hard. God forbid my father, used to tell me like, like these people don't like you. Like don't have some fantasy like these people don't really like you. You take your studies seriously. Get that shit out of your head. These people don't like you. And so there's a certain clarity to that. Like if I had kids and I was sending them to school, and they were being like invited to parties or something, like like the in group or popular, they're just like, no, these people don't like you. Get that crap out of your head. Get those vanities of popularity out of your head. You do your job. You stay on point. You do what you're supposed to do. Take your studies seriously. Work hard, and don't have any fantasies of popularity. And so from that perspective, like having very negative feedback uh, is what keeps people working hard, because the fantasies of popularity uh, cause people to stop working so hard.
Almost like it's good to walk into adversity in a iron sharpens iron type of way.
Um, yeah, I mean, if it's not productive conversation, so if it's just hate for the sake of hate, or battlefield is like, okay, like you're just going to be a martyr for nothing. So I mean, there's productive conversation, and then there's diminishing returns. It's like T Jump or like Ralph modern day debate. At an end, very quickly, uh, politically provoked. You're going to hit diminishing returns extremely quickly. The people you're going to siphon off, and
I
the
don't really
hatred.
look at it as like a matter of poaching followers. But I see what you mean. Yeah, I mean, on Kurt, there's a chance to get a lot of followers real quick if I can charm the audience.
Well, you did. I'm saying factually, you poach followers from T Jump, and you could in your own mind have a different conversation.
Seriously hard time believing that.
Well, I mean, you did. I'm saying even like half the people watching are like people you poached from T Jump.
They probably still watch Teach.
Yeah, but I'm saying that half the people watching now are that like are people that you poached from T Jump, and if they still watch him, but saying Jai Mongol could be a friendly audience, and so even like the half the people that you poached from T Jump, and even like the comments in the chat, like no offense, like these people really don't like you. I mean, they're watching you, they have a little bit of interest, but like even your own chat doesn't really like you, and because you poached them from T Jump.
I consider that a high achievement.
Well, I mean, you could look at it that way and saying like, okay, no matter what the situation, you have a positivistic look towards it.
If
like
people feel that comfortable pushing back on me, that means I'm what? Jocular and approachable, doesn't it? In some sense.
Well, I mean, hope is the natural emotion. No matter what situation humans are in, people have the emotion of hope. And I mean, there's also fear, and people give up. But it's like hope is the natural emotion, and to interpret things in a positive way. So it's like, okay, like no one likes me, and the only people who give me any attention is largely negative. The human natural order is this aspect called hope, to try to frame that in some sort of positive way. So it's really just like a framing, and to some extent, karma's karma. Like money's money. You're making money. You have a certain dollar amount in the bank, and so reaction in terms of positive feedback, negative feedback, it's largely factual. So if you're getting mostly negative feedback, you could try to interpret it, some way, like the quote in The Hustler, the author of the Queen's Gambit. So like, I'm the best there ever is, and even if you beat me, I'm still the best. So it's kind of like the natural order, like I'm the best, and just because I lost doesn't change the fact that I'm the best. And so basically, all people think like that. There's that natural element to be like, like man, I keep on losing, but like in my own mind, I still keep this fantasy that I'm the best. But there is some sort of factual element of what it means to win, and quantifiable. What does it mean to have your own following, to have your own minions, to be getting super chats and donations, positive feedback, to have your own cheering squad, so to say. So you could try to resolve your dissonance by interpreting negative things through the filter of hope, but they're largely quantifiable, and it's pretty obvious to everybody what positive feedback is and what negative feedback is.
Well, what's better, deception and flattery, or truth that is sometimes hurting of the feelings? You, the viewers, decide.
Well, no, yeah, I mean, because hope is natural, like it's a chunking thing. So, uh, the human mind, all people in all situations, are going to filter the data through the lens of hope. So, if you see like Jennifer and you're just interpreting Jennifer, like all humans will filter her situation through the lens of hope. And so, okay, you have some positive feedback. You have over 1,000 subs. You have a weekly show now, episode 144. You have um, whatever signs of your positive feedback.
Bunch of stuff I
Uh,
can't talk about.
you have maybe your negative feedback, uh, in like so like relatively, uh, these things are somewhat objective, that they're measurable. Like an independent third party could look and see like here's your uh, here's where you're standing. Like I saw the famous John Lennon quote, who says that the music industry is an extension of the Jewish religion. Um, so I mean, there is a connection between like management, promotion, personalities, media, Hollywood, and a Jewish way of looking at the world, related to what I say karma, as like a karma dollar type value, double ledger accounting of good and bad. But you don't need like a Judeo outlook to understand promotion, personality, media, numbers, popularity. There's you could say you can't completely objectively measure these things, because it's based on the hard problem of consciousness, understanding what does it mean to be liked or disliked. But you have large amounts of psychometric data, large amounts of statement and feedback that could give a person an overall picture of popularity, of like and dislike.
Hmm. I wanted to go into, yeah, I guess just I mean, what do you want to talk about? Is there anything in particular that's like pretty much what I had some diagrams.
Well, I'll finish what I was saying with like
Sure.
the like you could consider the Putin strategy, where I don't care whether I'm disliked. There's facts on the ground, like money in the bank, or my family, my prosperity, and like winning the war versus winning the narrative battle of whether people think I'm a good guy or a bad guy. And so you like if you follow the wars, like uh, the facts on the ground is Russia and Putin appear to be winning, as where the facts of the narrative and public like and dislike is Putin and Russia are severely losing. So can both be true, that like relatively the military operation is going extremely good for Putin and Russia, while at the same time he's an extremely unpopular person, and one of the most disliked people in the world. So you have like a double ledger accounting, and different venues, and then to create an overall balance, like a dollar amount, is very difficult, because you have it's hard to transfer the values of certain things. So if you're saying, okay, like I got my money, I got my possessions, I might have my popularity, respect within a small group of people, but then at the same time I'm extremely hated, and the news always says bad things about me, and so on and so on. How do you cancel those things out? Is like, for every one person who likes me, every one person who dislikes me, that cancels out one person who likes me.
You don't think that's a bit of a twisted accounting? Like, who cares what people think to some extent? That's what I hear my mom saying in my head, at least.
Well, I'm talking the science of karma. I mean, Lex Friedman and Mark Zuckerberg mentioned that. He was like, Lex Friedman is like, like a lot of people don't like you, Mark. Like the polling now, like, and so Mark Zuckerberg was saying, okay, like if you're a big personality, whether 75% of people don't like you or 25% of people don't like you, that's a lot of people who don't like you. But it's like, okay, if thousands of people like me, even though tens of thousands of people don't like me, does that cancel out the thousands of people that like me? Or is there some sort of separate venue to measure these things? And it's hard to give one overall baseline number. And so accurate accounting of karma has to have the whole picture, and it can't be reduced to like a truth function and one overall like equity number somewhere between 0 and 1, or maybe like that it does if actually reduce overall to some number somewhere between 0 and 1, and there is a canceling factor between like how many people
No, I
have
think various sutras could allude to it. What's the measure of a man type thing. But I don't really think you can formalize it.
The ethics of the sages, Perkyovo says, every good deed you do, you create a positive angel, and every bad deed you do, you create a negative angel. So it's factual that you have good angels and bad angels. They don't cancel each other out. And, so it creates for complex situations where you could have a low karmatic balance, and you could have a high karmatic balance. You could have a, but yeah, it's better to understand things in complex ways. It's good to simplify them, and media is media. So if you're trying to put yourself out there, you're in the streaming business, you're trying to put yourself out there to a bigger crowd, recruit an audience. There's a science to it, and you can understand these type things, and like bad publicity is still publicity, and there's different ways of understanding it, but it's measurable. And as I said, that all people filter things through the lens of hope.
It's the oldest survival strategy, perhaps. One thing I wanted to talk about was sign 0 with my little mini joke there that I was going to do. Well, this is a semi-serious thing, because obviously 0 equaling negative 0 isn't a problem. Or is it? On what level is it a problem, if it's a problem? And then I saw, or someone brought this to my attention. It's very interesting. I sent this to Doowovid mainly just because I wanted to talk about how computers are handling numbers. And this is sort of branching out of consciousness. Yeah, so I guess we could go in one of two directions. Like we could do a case study of the Hindu understanding of consciousness. Or we could try to develop a computation language that incorporates, we'll just assume Thad's thing is right, that 7 degrees of accuracy is the maximum. And try to come up with a coding language that encompasses the 7-fold, whatever you want to call it. And so this sign 0 thing was interesting because it suggests to me that the numbers started to become represented by fundamentally non-numerical things, fundamentally iterative things, i.e. what you think of if you're generating y equals 1 over x from x, but you're generating one term in the x sequence at a time, you're generating the y's at the same time, then that sort of construction of numbers themselves, rather than numbers as static entities that were sort of, the list exists there, and we're just plucking things out of it. Anyway, I just wanted to call attention to that because clearly 0 equaling negative 0 is non-trivial if IEEE has an opinion on it. So that's about that. And I did come up with a couple diagrams. I don't know if you had any thoughts on those, but I can share those in a minute. Different screen for those. If not, it's fine. Let's see. You there, Doowovid?
Yeah. Were you gonna share those diagrams, or your computers to?
I can, and I'm about to. It's just in a different screen. I don't want to accidentally share the wrong screen, so I just have to unshare it, and then I'll reshare it once it's de-shared. That's why I wanted to know if you had any ideas as I was doing that process. So let's see if I can bring this up to the right one. Did you see the link that Moral Outrage Prophet posted? It was another image there.
No.
Well, if there's no hidden meaning, I'm not going to try to discern one. So there wasn't a hidden meaning last time. So if there is one, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to take it as a purely aesthetic romp, not meant to be analyzed in any way, shape, or form. So I did a show with Memes of Destruction this week that I thought went pretty well. I was able to.
I did watch that after in 2-speed.
What'd you think?
Has been hit.
I mean, I found it semi-interesting, but it's not really systematic, so I don't gain that much from it. And so it's kind of just like talking heads. You don't lay it out in a systematic way, so it's kind of hard to follow and see like a value to like I'm actually learning something.
I've got a diagram. How much more systematized do you want it?
Well, I mean, systematic to lay out like, what are you talking about? What are you trying to explain? How does it fit into some sort of a bigger picture? Like a chunking, breaking it down into the key components, and so I'm not much for like conversational education. Like I'm not really a conversational type person. I'd rather have things systematized and organized.
We could set that kind of presentation to be like
dark meter. Like, I'm a serious person. Like I like to make progress. I'm not really a cheerful type person. And like obviously, like we're at war. The world's seeking into war. God forbid. But yeah, man, that's just my personality.
Yeah, so pedagogically, you don't see the risk in putting down a highly specific, systematized presentation. You don't see the risk of misunderstanding there that could possibly happen.
I think risk of misunderstanding is relatively minimal. That I'm more with the risk of wasting time, and so saying no understanding. So I would say like no. I'm saying like if you understood what you're talking about, you would be able to systematize it, and just kind of
you can't set the parameters of that. The more you try to set those parameters, the more it's just like strange.
Well, that's my take. So like if you can't,
you don't understand that's a completely emotional argument,
though. I don't see how emotions coming into that.
You're saying, oh well, the knowledge, it ought to look like this. I don't know anything about knowledge, but I have a say in how it looks. It's like you don't. And thinking that you do is an emotional argument. It's a wishful thinking that goes all the way back to Aristotle.
Why it's systemized and organized? I mean, you have a claim that you have knowledge, and so it's just saying that if it's not organized and systematic, then to me that's a piece of evidence against this claim that you have knowledge.
And if someone can't read a simple diagram, that's simple evidence that someone doesn't deserve access to the knowledge. So it's like a total standstill.
Yeah, I mean, you could look at that way. You could say it that way.
It's not me. It's the tradition says that. For me to think I get a vote in traditional opinions is just to misunderstand what they are.
Yeah, but it's just a circular logic, because this claim that you have knowledge, whether you do or not, and then then it becomes circular to whether you actually have knowledge that you're giving over, and so I said that you're safe to put towards reject that So I mean, leave it in uncertainty. So there's uncertainty whether there's knowledge there or not. But I mean, the safer estimation is to assume it's not there. But I
Again,
mean, if there's uncertainty,
presupposing you know about
recognize
the
there's
structure of
uncertainty.
knowledge in advance of possessing it. Imprudent.
Yeah, so
Presuppositional thinking is, at best,
it's like the
self-fulfilling
least
at
action
worst.
principle. Occam's razor saying knowledge
Mm.
should be simple, it should be structured, it should be organized. If it's
Mm.
not
Now,
simple,
how many times do you think you're going to say that until it becomes true?
well, that's my axiom, so to say, to go off. So I mean, if you
How's it
want
working out for you?
to, I'd say pretty well. Like generally, it works out pretty well. Like for where I go for my sources of knowledge, how I try to gain knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean,
we have
there's
a
always
strict protocol, sort of. We have an exclusion to a strict protocol thing because we have an invocation of sovereign authority that trumps whatever the axiom may be, because we understand that axioms don't transcend a variable causality, like a materially variable causality, for example. Like, you don't see an
yeah. I mean,
issue with static axioms in that sense.
how you establish authority and even as an authority of knowledge that saying the established authority that we've talked about this many times, but I mean the methods of establishing authority and a supposition that a person has some sort of understanding and then some sort of demonstration of expertise, and even if you can't understand the person's understanding, that they've demonstrated some sort of expertise.
Do you have any idea how easy those things are to deke out, to fake out, to trip out? You're never worried someone's going to feed you fake false positives?
Well, I'm always skeptical, but yeah, I mean, you establish expertise, and say
I'm
it's
not so sure
recognized
about the
expertise,
skepticism on that level, to be honest.
or through I mean, that's generally why you always get the same reaction. Like, are you published? What can you do with this? And result based. That so if it's something in the realm of science, if it's what exactly are you explaining? What exactly do you have knowledge of? If it's something that that we'll say is recognized in academic circles or your general philosophical circles, like I sell a lot of books. I sold a book about aliens. Just yesterday. I'll mail it out tomorrow about like DNA evidence of aliens. Um, like I sell all kinds of books, and some of them are pseudoscience, some of them are science. Uh, there's different audiences, there's different um, the establishment of expertise is not an exact science, but there's say it's a soft science.
Well, there's a way to make it so that even if it's not an exact science, it's maximally precise, so it appears to be exact for anyone looking. It doesn't
depends what
matter,
you're trying
right?
to establish. It's like, how do you establish expertise? You have credentials, you have provable uh, results, like for
Demonstration.
science, like engineering, to some extent, and being able to describe known phenomenon and in a repeatable way that so to say, if you had some knowledge and then you taught me, then I would be able to describe that to a third person, and that knowledge would be so to say, in my possession. So people I've learned things from, that they teach me something and I can teach it to others, and it's sensical, it stands on its own.
And a person who thinks they're fit to set terms on knowledge is not fit to receive it. That's one of the sayings.
I mean, it's one of your sayings.
The sayings.
But just one of your sayings. I mean,
to the knowledge of which I am a steward.
Yeah, I mean, you're not even quoting an authority, you're just quoting yourself.
Let's think
Like,
about that for
you're
a
not
minute.
even you're not even like a Hare Krishna who's like quoting something. You're just quoting yourself.
It's a simple thing to demonstrate. It's an egotistical thing to think that in advance of possessing knowledge, you could set the terms on any aspect of it. That's an obvious fallacy to anyone who has any reason.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm setting terms. I'm just saying that
You are by imposing whatever random standards. I mean, that's like the whole point of these Zen koans. Like 95% of these Zen koans, like the whole, the one where the guy holds the guy's head underwater and he's like, "What did you want?" Air. And that's that. It's the whole thinking you can be reasoning your way, the fallacy of thinking it's possible to, or believing rather, that it's possible to reason your way to enlightenment. Or even past, like not even enlightenment all the way, just like to past post-rational states. Anyway, I'll go through the diagrams because those are rather funny. I don't think I sent you the link, and I don't think, because I really don't get the impression you're interested in this twisted Buddhist logic stuff.
I'm in minor interest in everything, but
I could probably have quite a lot of fun with this stuff for quite a while, so I don't want to get boring or anything. I just I don't think that this stuff is being made clear at all. It's being made to look like a non very accurate version of what I seem to remember it as. And it's certainly not something you can just slap on anything and have it retain what it's actually supposed to do. Yeah, sure, you can generalize it, but that's like saying that because the Pythagorean theorem is true, light travels in straight lines. Now, is that the right conclusion to draw from that? What do you think, Doowovid?
because the Pythagorean theorem that light travels in a straight line.
Yeah, if we grant the truth of the Pythagorean theorem, does that imply light travels rectilinearly, if you will?
I'm not sure how the Pythagorean theorem has anything to do with
Because what it
or-
means to be perpendicular is a function of what it means to be parallel. And so there's perpendicularity defined within the Pythagorean theorem, which is orthogonal to parallel, uniquely orthogonal to parallel in R2. Which means that perpendicularity is a function of parallelity, if there was such a word. And so I'm not saying it's a fact. I'm just asking if Pythagorean theorem, then light traveling straight lines. And it's not just for Doowovid, it's for anyone. Challenge question if you want to use the method for fun. But yeah, I think this non-classical logic stuff is not very obvious if you've just only ever been using classical logic, which I haven't really been using very much except for the computer programming stuff, the applied stuff. This one works too, but doesn't land perfectly because the cardinality is 5 instead of 4. So this one has a residual, an infinite residual that's dual, not dual, but it has two like pretty much well-defined elements in the set, which is that a problem? Well, tune in next time. As far as I got today, because pretty much based on something I was talking about hours ago, not very long ago. So yeah, other than that, that's all I had to say on that topic, unless you want to go into it more.
Yeah, I'm not really sure I'm understanding what you're trying to say. So,
Doing just different demonstrations of the method that allowed me to get the quantum periodic table. And as I was suggesting earlier, that we could go in the direction of an exposition of the traditional, like Shah Darshan and stuff like that, the traditional schools, to show how they already tacitly utilize the thermodynamic recombinance model based on quantum gravity and transcendent knowledge of Oh, what's that? Photonic mechanics. That's right. And so, yeah, we could go in that direction, or we could go in the direction of like applied computing, where we try to actually build a quantum computer, which we can use to sample things. I think the first one is probably more the direction because it might relate more to your friend's show. Try Davey. But yeah, the main thing I think that this model has, like it's explicit that the other one doesn't, is infinite motion slowing down. So going from infinite motion to finite motion, but still some type of an infinity. And I think I went over that on the show with memes like about Brownian motion and planetary motion being the same type of motion, aka fluid motion. And a key takeaway there is that even though it's in a fluid state, a liquid state, it has intrinsic motion, like translational motion. The only one that doesn't have intrinsic translational motion is the solid. And the zero motion, aka absolute 0 point energy, aka absolute zero, well, that's not even something that's observable. And you're into an undefined limit point, so I am sort of almost cheating to make that one of the points of the 4-pointed decomposition thing. Anyway, I will work on making it more obvious, but like I don't even think I want to go into this. I don't even know if I want to go into it to level with Kurt, because there's like Advaita Vedanta has no real parallel in Occidental thought that I'm aware of. Okay, so there's a question in the chat. Would it eventually stop? No. And the evidence of that is that the 0 point energy has energy that's non-zero. So the lowest energy state has energy, has positive energy. Evidence of that is the inferred, what do they call it? The cosmic microwave background. So that's just spontaneous. Now you can look at it as something that's been there since quote the beginning of the universe, or just something is intrinsic energetic signature indicating that the universe has a non-zero 0 point energy. So you have basically all the states available except the one you're thinking of that's like the absolutely static one. But absolutely static concepts like tables and chairs and stuff, I mean, they're still part of our experience in the sense that they, determine the changes to materiality. Yeah, so that's about it. And in terms of going into all that with Kurt, like I don't want to. I was thinking I would start with basically say a proof by contradiction that it's possible to have a theory of everything, after I introduce myself with a completely cogent, coherent explanation as to my resume. What do you think about that? Like an actual, more probably a PowerPoint presentation. Like I was thinking.
Yeah, presentation is probably a good idea. I mean, you might want to talk about it with him. But you want to lead things in the direction of a theory of everything, and so your areas of thought in relation to the theory of everything, or how they might be useful towards a theory of everything, and then I guess you have to take a strategy or an approach if it's if you're going to make it all about you, where like at best it's all about you and you're just trying to explain your ideas, or if you're actually giving over useful information for other people.
Do you have the impression I want to talk about myself, or are you just speculating that as a possibility?
Well, just as a strategy that I mean, it could appear that that's your strategy, whether it is or not. That it appears that that's your strategy, where
Even though I keep not introducing myself and not talking about myself and trying to keep it on topic of arguments, that means I'm a narcissist. Is that it, basically?
Well, in your own way, because it's still about like these hypothetical ideas in your head that you think are right, but have difficulty expressing to other people. Um, as opposed to kind of like JF, who will just explain basic things over and over again, or if it's saying it's all about you, because it's always about your supposed ideas, as opposed to just generic education that would be transferable, that would be comparable to useful data that people could expect that they would get in other places. So if it's like a theory of everything, where you're leading someone in a direction that's going to help them in their own research, not necessarily that they're going to understand what it is that you think, but you're going to give them some sort of insight that will be useful for their own understanding, for their own research, and then create some sort of community that could cooperate on their ideas, as opposed to kind of like say like all about you, but it's like an advertisement to want people to learn more about you and your ideas.
You think what I'm doing is enticing people to learn more about me?
Well, I mean, it's unclear. Just saying that how people you should. I mean, just try watching yourself back, or get feedback to say what intentions are a tough thing. Like God forbid, like Putin in Russia, like everyone's saying this is his intention, and like they'll say this, they'll say something else is their intention, but everyone's like, no, we know that that's not really their intention, that this is their intention, because intentions are elusive, and to some extent people can't really know their own intentions, and it's difficult to know other people's intentions, but people will think in terms of their understanding of the other person's intention. And so you separate that and say, try to avoid the intention game by making it very clear, saying it's not about me, it's about these ideas, and then to classify and organize your ideas where it's easy to understand, like what you're talking about, that
Uh-huh.
and that how it would be useful to somebody else. Like I'm thinking about these things, and probably a lot of other people in the audience are thinking about these things, and these are the way that a lot of people think about these things, and here's some unique approaches to how I think about it that may be useful to you, or the viewer, and kind of like a chunking theory where you understand the organization of thought, how things are chunked. Saying like I've been thinking about these things for years. I have a pretty expertise understanding, and for an intermediate or even expert person trying to understand it, that you can understand how what you're telling them will be useful to them in their furthering understanding these topics.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that will be interesting.
And it's like the least, like I said, like I never put too much thought into Giant Mungo because it's about the ideas. And so if people understand what you're talking about, they may not even think about you. They just think about the ideas. And if they can't understand what you're talking about, then they'll probably switch into intentions and saying, well, what's she trying to do? And to try to well, I can't understand what she's saying, so maybe I could at least understand their intentions. And then saying, if you don't clearly express your intentions, or if you convey your intentions in a way that's not believable, then people will create their own picture of what they think your intentions are. And then that leads to just like,
Which will then reveal their intentions to me.
yeah,
Where's
which
the
is
drawback there?
kind of like, which just leads to like bad programming. Or, like the failure to communicate, as opposed to, some sort of easy to understand, clearly expressed value proposition that makes sense to the viewers, even if there's uncertainty about like intention or some of the things. But the value proposition is clear. Like, oh, here's this person that's dedicated large portions of their life to thinking about these ideas and has some insights on it. And I was able to put some of those insights immediately to me myself better understanding these ideas.
So get a big following of Hare Krishnas. You looking forward to that?
No, I don't have any plans on that at all.
Yeah. So yeah, that was basically going to be it. I was going to do like a disproof or a counterproof, reductio ad absurdum, to say that functionally, even if the periodic table is some type of unified field model, it's not really a theory of everything, because you can't get anything in the language of the model. So that's the point I want to get across. And it's just a question of, maybe some sort of metaphor to get that across quickly, or a story. I certainly don't want to make it a me-centric story, but also we don't want people drawing, erroneous conclusions about my intentions either. So, hey memes, what's up? Nice to see you. And that was basically as far as I got, but afterwards I think I want to try to talk about the pre-existing unified field models or modeling architectures that already exist in the tradition, the Hindu tradition. To some extent, I want to touch on those. Put them forward as hypotheses. My theory of not everything, yes. That's right. Name for it. Let's just call it the theory of not everything. Let's just drop Jen out of it entirely. I don't think anyone wants to call something Sharfian mechanics, Nah. I guess it's just different things for different people. Like I get a lot of I enjoy the T-jump crowd. And you're sort of more with the I don't know. Maybe you're still discovering what you're into. I'm glad that you found the Hindu channel though. That's great. And hopefully it won't be all Hindi. Yeah, did you want to talk about I was going to say Indian Tucker Carlson, but Arnab Goswami? Did we go into that enough?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably just going to lead into talking about the war in Ukraine, and I'm not really a person for crowds. Like, I'm kind of purpose driven, and generally crowds are purposeless and distract from purposes. So I'm not really a crowd type personality. If you in more value proposition, extract a few people from the crowd that have a mutual purpose, forward ideas, and then that's about it. So like, I'm not really trying to get in on any crowds or groups or anything like that. Just to find more advanced scholarship ideas, purpose driven collaboration. So I'm actually I kind of distaste for T Jump and his crowd. It's
Why?
but
Because you think they're just navel gazing?
yeah, just kind of a unfriendly, negative, quasi anti intellectual behavior. Um, I'm not hating on anything, but it just like the law of diminishing returns. Like I think my returns diminished on that in one conversation. But like yeah, no, I don't. It's just conversations that don't go anywhere. People that don't take each other seriously. People that couldn't accurately say back what the other person said. So no matter how clearly you try to express yourself, where like no, not a single person would accurately be able to say what you thought and be like the intentions like kind of like the war in Ukraine, like like, oh, he's just doing it because he wants to restore Russia to their previous, or he's just doing it because he's upset, or like these kind of impugning intentions. And it's like, well, no, I don't think that's my intention. It's not what I said. And then some sort of unanimity among the crowd that this is your intention anyways. This is what we think your intention is, even though you don't think that's your intention, or you didn't say that. And so it's kind of a, I'd say, anti-intellectual, uh, no value proposition. It doesn't lead anywhere. Conversations that don't lead anywhere, and are just kind of unnecessarily unfriendly because, and not just T Jump, kind of like Zobita or politically provoked. No, even less. I mean, politically provoked is probably even less so that way. But because everyone's impugning intentions, and and no one really listens to what the other person's saying to honestly try to understand what the other person said.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not a good feeling to be given the impression someone's not listening to you, for sure. Yeah, it's been a tough week. But yeah, so I don't know if you still want to say anything or maybe want to wrap it up early this week. You seem a little deflated.
Probably just
Conflict is stressful.
if you want to talk about anything, we should probably talk about the war, but there's probably no productive way to talk about that. And so maybe we should just wrap it up early. Um, my research hasn't been really getting anywhere in the last few weeks. I finished that book on Cantor. I'm still reading that book on logic. But now I feel like I haven't really been getting anywhere in my research. I've been spending more time in my business and books and thinking a lot about the war. I have a lot of thoughts on the war, but it's probably not the right venue to talk about it.
Um, yeah, I don't know how that would be conducive to deeper understanding of consciousness unless you want to tie it back to that somehow, like mass hysteria or strange behavior from people.
This is the Yuval Noah Harari, and he was saying, don't say that this is just human behavior that that leads to bad things. If you see like war and these horrible things, and just like, well, that's just human behavior, because that could. I mean, he didn't really. It wasn't kind of logical. He had a TED talk, and I listened to that. I didn't even share it, and I watched a few talks like that. But I mean, that's kind of my approach. There's just a natural method of human behavior, and conflict is natural to human behavior and conflict, and even dissonance. I'd say that if you're looking at right now the stage where most people are just doubling down and ready to escalate conflict, and it might relate to reincarnation, where people are to some extent ready to die and they'll get reincarnated, and the dissonance is just too much for them. So at a certain point, to say like, I think I understand both sides and the motivations and the rationality of both sides, and my understanding of karma, that there's just a certain element of karma where both sides are fulfilling their karmatic dharmatic duty that has led up to conflict due to a series of bad decisions and unfortunate events, versus saying like, no, there's good guys and bad guys, and heroes and villains, and to say the side I'm on are the good guys and the other guys are the bad guys. And most conversations are based on that. Like even Ralph, Charles, um it's mostly about good guys and bad guys. And it's probably a level of cognitive dissonance where you just can't get past that. And once you're on that level, really there's nothing to do but escalate the conflict. And God forbid, I would say that most people would probably take their cognitive dissonance into death. That to really understand the global world.
Why should death be the end?
Well, it won't be, but to say you can't understand conflict, you can't understand the pressures and the causes that are causing conflict, and why there's conflict of interest, group conflict, and various things. I mean, to some extent, it's just kind of dumb. Like, why are these people on various sides in conflict with each other? And say it's zero sum. There has to be a winner, there has to be a loser, and therefore there's escalation and deterrence theory, as opposed to some sort of greater compromise or understanding or bigger picture. But so to say that bigger picture is beyond the horizons of most people's cognitive dissonance. So the cognitive dissonance level you will basically lead them to death. That they'll escalate the conflict. They'll go to war, they'll die, and they'll take their cognitive dissonance into death, into the next life, even though there's really answers to these questions. And so it's just like, to most people, they understand exactly why it's going on, and it's because these guys are bad guys and these guys are good guys. And that's not my perspective on understanding these things. And you take a deeper level of human nature and conflict, and group conflict, zero sum resources, and various things. And to most people, it's probably beyond their intellectual capacity. And but cognitive dissonance is factual. And just like you're saying, okay, maybe you understand these things better than other people, but if the information that's in your head can't get into their head, very rarely do people accept authority. People accept authority of basically their group, their karma. So
I
to
don't know
say,
what your experience is with people not accepting authority. I have different experiences, I suppose.
well, I say high or low birth. When people accept the authority that is their birth karma, like their group identity, that saying I'm part of this nation. It's like, okay, I'm Ukrainian, or I'm Russian, I'm Jewish, I'm American. That so the authority, that if the authority structures at B say that these guys are the good guys, these guys are the bad guys, we're going to war, this is our conflict, most people will accept that, so to say, amount of authority. And then to say, to look towards, and even karmatically, like intellectually, I want to understand certain ideas, so I seek out expertise, and to learn expertise, or even like religiously, if you seek out a master or a guru and to learn from the guru. But what does the guru have to say to your identity? So you're still a U.S. citizen or Canadian. So if you're Ukrainian, it doesn't really matter who your guru is. You still have your identity, which to some extent transcends other authorities. That if you're Ukrainian right now, uh, it doesn't really matter who your guru or your teacher is. They can't really give you any advice that will transcend your identity, except maybe to run away from your identity or accept a new identity. You could flee Ukraine and try to start anew, separate from your identity in another place. But to some extent, the higher low birth or your birth identity will transcend all other factors, and is the main factor in dissonance in authority and how we understand the world.
Is it being recognized as authority when people are making the decision, like, to get involved emotionally on that level? Because I doubt it.
Well, I said, like, okay, you could talk about like authority as like a guru or a scientist and intellectual, but authority really means state and power, and so like whatever authority you're talking about is different than say the normative authority, which is the authority of the state, and power structure is the law of the army. So it's like you might have some sort of authority, but you don't have the power of the state or the army. And
It's not states and armies that confer the authority of science. Although I understand and accept the point that you're making and not trying to deny it. I'm just saying some forms of authority are not defined that way. They just literally cannot be.
well, yeah, but it's saying that's a secondary authority because, like, you could say from a spiritual level it's more important. But when you're at war, it's like, okay, I'm on the battlefield and I'm still trying to understand these complex ideas. But like, no, I mean, like, uh, your spiritual or scientific intellectual authority in that respect is the more primal authority of, like, okay, the battlefield um, isn't going to tell me what side I'm on. That's my primal identity. That's the state. That's the government. That's the army. That's going to tell me what side I'm on. And therefore what has to be done. And so, I mean, you could be Ukrainian and be like, like I was telling Charles, like, okay, like I'm a Jew, and I think about it from the other perspective, say the Palestinians, and sometimes I think that they're right and we're wrong, but that doesn't change my identity. I'm still, on this side, and have my dharma related to my identity. Uh, that has nothing to do with whether I'm right or wrong, or like that my dharma. Uh, and so when conflict increases, uh, that's why dissonance is so difficult. Because to accept, okay, this is my dharma, this is the side I'm going to be fighting on, even though we may be on the wrong. And if you're talking about, okay, like right now the most important thing is getting weapons in the hands of the Ukrainian or something like that. So it's like, okay, like Jennifer's going to explain to you some sort of theory of everything, but like, how's that going to help Ukraine win the war? And say, well, it's not. And you can say, okay, after the war is over, maybe you'll go back to the research, and and it'll be valuable to understand these ideas. It's
But less
remote.
wars long term. If people see that there's something to preserve in knowledge, then wars are likely not to be as devastating for a civilization.
Well, that's unclear. And then there could be separate factors, that there's dharma's dharma, and there's just a separate factor that's causing the war. And so if you're in a neutral place where it doesn't really matter to you, where you could be geographically, that or politically, that the authority structures that you're under allow you to be neutral, and so that's your, so to say, the luxury of your karma, that the war is not affecting you.
Good point. It's a bit hard to, relate to something not to, it just seems not really connected.
And I mean, you can see that, okay, the whole world is interconnected, and violence, conflict is the most carnal of forces, and people start escalating conflict. It could have ramifications everywhere. uh, and even like the Lex Friedman, Mark Zuckerberg is talking about these things, is bringing people together, uh, make it worse or better, and that remains a dispute among scholars. That it's unclear, and even the traditions, saying like at the end of the day, okay, it's going to be my dharma to go into the battlefield and fight, even though I may lose, and whatever higher purpose to create karma dharma in that way. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I think most of my energy focus right now is on the war, and it looks bad. That's why I said it looks like it's going to escalate. I don't really see any scenario where it doesn't escalate, and that's probably bad. But I mean, maybe it doesn't matter that it's bad. You just say, okay, these are the facts on the ground, and it's like hope is the
Have you
natural.
been tracking the stock market for any type of melt up that might indicate something shifting?
The market seems relatively strong, so as of now, it might be isolated, and maybe just because like Judaism, there's a lot of Jews in Ukraine and Russia and Israel is could be at the center of this, and like obviously the president of Ukraine is Jewish. So, but the markets relatively seem stable. That it seems isolated. That Russia and Ukraine, and the likelihood that it's going to spread into a regional conflict is less likely. And if it does spread into a regional conflict, like it could, places like Iran, Syria, and Russia and Israel are likely to be areas where it would spread. I think it'd be much more likely for the conflict to spread in Syria, Iran, and Israel than to further places of Europe, and that will have minimal effect on the stock market, like the global supply chain. Oil prices going up, have certain effects. Like so, here in the U.S., um, the markets seem relatively strong. Like the chance that this is going to have much of a effect on us here in the U.S. is minimal. Although I'm probably more worrying about Israel, and the chance that this would have some sort of effect on Israel is much higher.
Geographic or market proximity, you sort of like you lost me. I see America as more the center of the markets there. And is this being connected to like supply chain issues largely?
Yeah, the market seems strong, and it's unlikely that the conflict is going to have huge effects on the market. But in terms of regional conflict, that because Russia is the main stabilizing force in Syria and Iran, so anything destabilizing Russia will likely have effect in Israel, because like Israel is constantly bombing Syria and under Russian control. Like Iran is constantly sending weapons towards hostile forces towards Israel, and so it's saying that in terms of actual violence and conflict, uh, Israel is actually a very likely place that this could spread to, and that may have minimal effects on the market. Also, it has some effect on global supply chain, like the Suez Canal, and the global supply chain or oil, fuel prices. But yes, even in like the U.S., Australia, New Zealand, Canada, uh, the effect would be somewhat minimal. There, like and uh, inflation and increasing fuel prices. So the danger in the U.S. is probably more inflation, and that's not due to the conflict in Russia and Ukraine or what's happening in Israel. That's due towards internal economic policy, high deficits, and various factors. But like no, I would say like if you're in the U.S. right now, uh, there's destabilizing forces, uh, and you just say like our country is weaker. You could say that we don't really have any power to affect what's happening in the Ukraine. The most we could do is give weapons. It's unclear how good of an idea it is to give the Ukraine weapons. Uh, and the internal challenges facing us here in the U.S. are largely independent of this conflict, although there might be similar type things that are that will cause internal strife, and so this impugning motives I take as a bad sign, where it's just kind of like, as opposed to rational actors, where we're seeing good guys and bad guys. So if on the global stage we're seeing good guys and bad guys, on a local stage we'll probably also see good guys or bad guys. So it's kind of like T jump. It's like we're just arguing like intellectual ideas that have nothing really to do with me or him. But still, it's kind of like good guys and bad guys. Like, the reason you think about the idea in this manner is because you're a bad guy, and the reason this guy thinks in this manner is because he's a good guy. And so, I think that's just a sign of global negative karma. That
Emotional thinking, at least. Dark Matter Battle Rap wants to know what you think about the investment in semiconductors in Ohio. It's historic issues there with the sort of centralization
the Intel.
of those and associated industries.
Yeah, I mean, President Biden mentioned that in his speech, and it's unclear how good, like, the government entering some sort of huge spending program to help create an Intel factory. Um, I'm not sure. Like, I went Apple. Um, Chips are important, like the global supply chain. Um, I think we're going to reach a period of austerity, and so some sort of large spending programs, uh, especially in future technology, might be the wrong direction. We should focus on old school, like infrastructure, buildings, fuel, and so large spending on futuristic technology, better chips, maybe self-defeating, and it's kind of like this global competition. We need to invest all this money in the latest microchips and produce them here in America, so we can be globally competitive. That like, reality is like we need to fix our crumbling infrastructure, and so I'm skeptical of like, I'm skeptical of like the government and private corporations teaming together to spend a whole bunch of money. Probably corruption.
Doesn't seem to be any mechanism to disincentivize it in the end.
One thing that they're investing in future technologies. Well, the basic infrastructure is crumbling, which is probably not the best idea. We should probably fix like our basic infrastructure before investing in futuristic technologies. So just seem like it's probably going to fail. Like, if we can't keep up our basic infrastructure, it's unlikely we're going to be able to push ourselves forward with infrastructure for the next generation. And I mean, so it's interesting. Maybe it'll have some sort of impact, like in terms of like creating jobs. These things usually don't create that many jobs. Like new gadgets, like like whether there'll be a whole bunch of chips and faster computers at cheaper prices, or something like that. That may be possible, but how much is that really going to benefit? To pump out a whole bunch of the latest fastest microchips. Uh, when our more basic fundamental things like food prices and potholes, roads, crumbling buildings. Um, so I'm skeptical.
Have you heard anything about Elon Musk saying that could use Neuralink to erase memories?
No, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get into the mind of the transhumanist.
I'm going to say, when these technologies are available and demonstrated to work, they'll probably become popular very quickly. And like, I was trying to explain that to Charles, and then
I really doubt it. I mean, yes, for people who have problems, I guess, I don't know if disability is the right word, but like, I have a friend who's colorblind, So yeah, the tech works for him. And then there's someone else who even has like it integrated. It's not my friend. Someone I saw in a TED talk is like integrated. I don't even know. It's like he can see sounds or some shit. I don't know. Very unusual. But this was a long time ago. Like that tech is not that new. And
It's like
it's not
Ralph.
mainstream at all. So you're saying, oh yeah, this like unforeseen tech now is going to be in the future and everyone's going to go for it then? Or that's the dream of the.
Well, it's like say Ralph and Charles. They're all like paranoid about the intentions of these like they and like unknowns elites that are going to do something that's going to ruin the world. And yeah, I'm not that kind of conspiratorial, right? Where I think that like, there's a they and they're going to try to take over the world. But I do follow the tech and saying that um, the first implications of technology usually is medical, like I said, like a pacemaker or something like that. Transhumanism, where you have machines and man working together, like in medical technology, things like a pacemaker or various electrical device implants for a person. They're usually because a person has some sort of health ailment, and then they have a device surgically installed in them in order to prolong their life. Most notably, something like a pacemaker. Um, if you're talking about a performance enhancement uh, technology that isn't directly related to bettering some sort of defect in health or injury, um, so once there's something like that that works, people will probably want it. If there's some sort of performance enhancing technology, especially if it's safe and effective, yeah, and cheap, uh, people are going to want it. And but I'm unclear technologically if these things actually exist or not. So most of the things that exist are in relation to fixing injuries or extending the life of people whose body isn't working the way it should, and they're not directly performance enhancement technologies.
Yeah. I'd be curious to. I mean, yeah. Oh, I guess we'll have to follow it. There's not that many.
If Tesla, if Elon Musk created some sort of performance enhancing device, and so okay, it's like um, um, virtual reality or these various things. They're not really performance enhancement. They could be useful for certain things or give a person a greater understanding. It could be, in terms of engineering or science education, that people have access to these technologies might have a better understanding, but they're not in the realm of performance enhancement. And as of now, I don't know. And even like the embedded chips aren't performance enhancement, they're more security purpose, that they could provide some sort of use, mostly for security in terms of knowing a person's location or being used as like a key or an identifier, but they don't actually enhance human performance. So the game changer will come when they actually have human performance enhancement technologies, and like I said, like I think once those exist, they'll be extremely popular, and there'll be large segments of the population that would experiment, like you said, like with a chip. Some people have gotten chips for security purposes, for the key for safety, uh, but we don't have a chip that does something useful really for people. Besides for like pacemakers and saying pacemakers, I don't think there's such a thing like an athlete or something would get some sort of pacemaker so that they could perform better. Like it only refers to people who, God forbid, have health challenges and therefore have these devices installed to function, how they would have without the, back to like semi normal standard. And most people with, like pacemakers or those type technologies function under par. But if you actually had a device that caused a person to function better than the rest of humanity, that would be, so to say, be a game changer. But as far as I understand, I don't know of any such devices. I mean, do you?
Not a device. I mean, I think the closest thing would be these nootropic, newfangled drugs, performance enhancer, sort of speed type drugs.
Yeah, that
Those
usually
seem to
largely
fit
have
that
long.
profile a little better.
Yeah, those aren't like electronic mechanical devices in old terms like drugs, and almost all of those have long-term health.
Well, if you go along with the materialists and consciousness is just electrical signals in the brain, then yeah, I guess they are.
Well, maybe I mean just like in the simple like steroids or sports, things that most of those have long-term negative health effects. That they might have a short-term performance enhancement, um, but that's not really transhumanism. Those are drugs, um, and that's kind of my point in being is that even though those have long term, most of those have long term negative health consequences. They're still extremely popular in like baseball, uh, performance sports. Like a lot of people do use them, even with the regulation. A lot of people use them even with the knowledge that they have long term negative health consequences. People use them, but as opposed to some sort of transhumanism, which would be some sort of chip or device that's not a drug and that likely would not have long-term negative health consequences.
Um, like an electromagnetic device implanted in the body might have consequences on par with treating one's body, mind as a playground or a scientific laboratory for novel chemical concoction.
Yeah, it'd have to be seen. I mean, if it's like steroids or something like that, we know the long-term negative health consequences of it. To having some sort of device implanted so that a person is corresponding with the machine, and to say how would that actually enhance someone's performance, like mental performance, if there would be some way to have an enhanced memory or enhanced calculation ability or instantaneous knowledge through some sort of internal connection to the computer, if that would be even theoretically possible. um, and then even if that did have a long-term negative health consequence, like if you could have a chip that would let you make extremely quick calculations, and it took, god forbid, like 10 years off of a person's life, there were just like steroids or something like that, there would probably be a lot of people who would do that anyways. But it's unclear if it would be like steroids that it would that it would have long-term negative health consequences like that. I mean, just like um, uh, like if you wanted to consider like a filling, uh, the most. I mean, let's say there's no necessarily long-term negative health consequence to uh, having a filling, or even if a person had a broken bone and they had some sort of like a pin or rod stuck in, that it's unclear that those things have long-term negative health consequences, let alone some sort of futuristic, like if you had an embedded chip inside of you. It's unclear that those have negative long-term health consequences in the same way that performance enhancing drugs do. I'm not sure, maybe there are performance enhancing drugs that don't have long-term uh, negative health consequences. I'm not an expert on that to know.
It's a bit complicated with anything in the domain of psychotropics, anything that can affect your consciousness more or less directly isn't going to have a, it's going to be even like less predictive in terms of the effect. You hear some people having LSD flashbacks months after having taken the drug, and this doesn't happen to everybody. And you have some people who go into basically a catatonic state after taking psychedelics, and this certainly doesn't happen in all cases. So whether shock is induced does make a huge difference there.
Yeah, but if I had like a chip implanted in my hand, and at this point they're mostly security devices, that the purpose of it wouldn't be performance enhancement, but it'd be like as a key or notifier security. I don't see any reason why that would have negative long-term health consequences. I mean, it could possibly lead to
Your mind
infection.
is electromagnetic, and you don't see an issue with electromagnetism interfering with an electromagnetic thing. Did you ever hear about the guy who got a brain tumor from being on his phone all the time?
I mean, that's possible. So I mean, that would have to be, so they'd have to be studied. But I say, like, in terms of the transhumanism, we're not at the point where the technology exists, from my understanding. That there, but as I said, like, if there was something that could enhance someone's memory, even if it was something literally like a chip that had to be implanted in someone's brain, that was dangerous like that, but had some sort of noticeable mental performance enhancement, I probably wouldn't get it, but maybe I would. Like if I was in school and
Well, let's say it made you unable to perform in your duties as an online merchant anymore because everybody else competing with you is just launching 10 products for every one of yours.
Yeah,
You're like,
even if
I gotta do it. I gotta stay competitive.
well, even if it was just computational intellectual output that the ability to speed read or to have a photographic memory or to make computations at a quicker, more accurate rate, that's important. So if if I had a kid and they were in school and there's their classmate got this chip and they're getting acing the tests and doing all this notable mental capacity, then say like, yeah, that would probably create a big incentive for other people to get it. So like saying once other people have it and it works, then then that would be a game changer. But that's why I said, from my knowledge, they don't exist.
Well, let's say there were, Adderall stopped being available on the market. Would that affect any YouTube careers?
Yeah, I mean that's not comparable in terms of what I'm talking, like in terms of like a transhumanism. That would be something that is a notable performance enhancement.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that the mechanical performance enhancer brain implant thing is even physically, I mean, does that make sense that that would even work? Like as some sort of a signal. I guess the idea is that the implant's a signal amplifier for the quote smart part of the mind. That's the idea. Giving a microphone to the best part of yourself.
Well, I mean, no, because computers could process and make computations and calculations much better than the human mind. So if there's some way to connect a computer, like talk like the Intel chip, uh, like if there was some way, even if it wasn't like a remote frequency device that was connecting to a larger computer, but even internal chip that just made calculations that better than the human mind, and like even if it's just simple mathematical or even a memory device that just say like if you went into public and you meet 100 new people, it's hard to remember. Even if you just meet 5 new people, it's hard to remember their names. So if there was some sort of method to implant a chip that would give computational or memory abilities, that would be extremely useful to people. And so if like uh, in terms of any performance, if someone had a memory chip that allowed them to uh, conquer the problems of short-term memory. And we talk about the seven plus or minus two all the time, and some method of a chip where you could just remember countless data without the limitations of short-term memory, or a simple computation, even if it's just like mathematics or whatever would be able in a chip. But yeah, it would seem likely if you could find a way to connect a chip into the human mind, that the calculations, uh, that your mind wants to do these calculations, and mentally, that desire to make the calculation would be transferred to the chip, and the chip would make that calculation and then transfer the answer to the calculation back to the person's mind. That would be a complete game changer in in human knowledge. Like, you could go into crowds of thousands of people, and you remember all of their names, uh, and then you could even possibly be given instantaneous information if it was connected to an outside device, like a computer, like a if the chip had vision to my what I'm seeing, and so if I see an unknown object, that would be like instantaneous access to an internet database. That like we mentioned, the face in the crowd, when you think that you see someone that you knew, but imagine that you had uh, going to a new place, and then that information would be instantaneously accessible, where you look at somebody, and then through the power of the chip, that the chip would tell your mind all this information instantly. That would be a complete game changer, change humanity. It's unclear, like the hard problem of consciousness, that whether, um, my understanding and my take on the dualism, the hard problem of consciousness, uh, it might be impossible, but even as a dualist, that it might. I don't see why in the future of technology something like that won't be possible.
Because it interferes with the mind. So that would be unwanted. Perhaps it would work to the extent of controlling something external, like a robot arm, or video game type deal, like Pong.
Yeah, so I
Animal
think of
played Pong.
transhumanism. That's what I'm thinking of. I think of performance enhancement, and mostly mental. You could also look at like physical performance enhancement, in terms like let's say like a bodysuit or something, like a jetpack, or some sort of like thing I could attach to my legs, and then all of a sudden I could carry thousands of pounds or something like that, like a little. Uh, but that would unlikely be some sort of embedded device, like in terms of a strength, like Wolverine or something like that, X-Men or something. That's unlikely. Like that would have to be surgically embedded. Although it's possible that would be like like you would somehow surgically embed some sort of mechanical and devices that would give people super strength.
Remember Geordie LaForge off of Star Trek with the eye band thing? Is that him? That seems realistic. Because it's external. Like, as long as it's not interfering with the mind in the brain, and the mind and the brain's controlling it externally, it would probably be fun-ish.
Well, they already have Google glasses like that. So if you just meant like internet, like a Google glasses, and possibly that it could see your environment, and so like I said, like in your mind, that you're talking like an embedded chip that would be inside your mind, versus like a Google glasses, where I could put on some sort of pair of glasses, and then that pair of glasses would be able to read information, and then access the web or larger source of information, and then put that in front of my eye. So it was like facial recognition, where you could walk into a place where you didn't know anybody, and then the glass would recognize things, and then put right in front of your eye, like a data set, like I said, like Jennifer in her bio, that even though you can't give yourself a bio, that if you were in a public place and someone had the Google glasses, that the Google glasses would provide that bio. And those already exist to some extent, like how well they work, but you can get Google glasses, and they will display on your glasses, where you could see through the glasses, but at the same time they'll put print or images on the screen that you could look at, and that could also convey information about your environment, where you'd have some sort of embedded camera that's looking right in front of you, and then the glass would put on the screen in some sort of transparent way that you'd still be able to see through it, but it would convey information about your surrounding. So those already exist. And they may even be not that expensive. It could be even like $1,000. You could get Google glasses.
Is there some way to just operate the computer with your eyes and not your hands? Because that would be pretty cool, but I doubt that existed.
I don't think you use your hands. Like it has some sort of method of you like moving your head or something in different ways that cause it to. But I think it could detect your gaze, and then it might land on the gaze, and you have some sort of camera, and then some sort of sensor that would read the object, and then some search method that would search for information about the object that you're gazing at and put that in front of you, and that there'd be some sort of method of like more or less that would be done through some sort of head motion. So I'm not exactly sure how they work, but I think they work in that way where it'd be some sort of controlled motion that would cause it to either to give you more or less information.
Seems like it would be very hard to. It's a nice idea. It just seems like it would be tough to make
Maybe
that
I'll look into it.
realistically
I think they exist. And
at scale.
I think they're not certain that expensive. Like how will they, what type of information they offer, and then also it'd be futuristic, like the Internet of Things, where it would pick up sensors and other devices. So like if it's not like looking and using some sort of camera and connecting that to a larger system that processes it. So it's like your Google Glasses has to connect us to like your phone or some sort of computer that processes it. But at the same time, that if other things had chips in it, then it could read that information. So if like you went into Starbucks and or like a mechanical device, that the glasses would pick up the chip, and then they would be able to read the information and display the information in the same way like car to car for driverless cars, that if a car senses another object, another car, that it wouldn't be like the car doesn't use like a camera to detect the car and get the information. The car has some, recognizes the chip in the other car, and they communicate to each other directly. So I think that's the direction of the Google glasses, that it would be able to read that type information, and then as it got more popular, there would be more and more, the Internet of Things. More and more things would have chips embedded that send some sort of signal with data. And yeah, so I mean, memes saying like hub node, like a futuristic infrastructure. So like our infrastructure is crumbling. So they have, like here in Detroit, they have places where they've built this out to test mostly autonomous cars. But even the Internet of Things is very popular, and in some like industrial facilities, everything basically has a chip that records what the device is doing, and then creates a signal that is capable of sending that data to other devices. So like every machine, and even like a smart house, for energy efficiency, or if you get an appliance like a stove, a microwave, a washing machine, dishwasher, that just all the data from the device would connect to some sort of communication device that would make that data available to other devices. So that's already the current state of technology, and most new devices already have that in. And then so if you had something like Google Glasses, that would be able to read the information off of these devices. Um, like I'm pretty sure that's something that's already in existence, but like how useful that would be for like you walking down the street. It could be quite a bit. Like I'll look into it, and it may not be that expensive. It could be for like $1,000. You could get that, and I don't know if you're like walking down Detroit, how useful that would be if they would be all of a sudden like on my glass screen would be all this useful information that's being pumped directly to me. Um, but that's not really transhumanism. Like transhumanism applies some sort of embedded surgical thing that changes my essence. So it's not like putting on Google Glasses. It means some sort of embedded chip, and it could also be like performance enhancement, like a memory. There'd be some method. It's possible you could have like a Google Glasses that would tell you the names of people. So if you went into a room and met like 10 people, 20 people, and they gave you basic names and information, that they would be, a Google Glass method, where even if you don't remember, that when you look at the person, the glass would, convey that information, like their name and the basic information of that person. So I think that exists also. I'm not sure how well it is, or how it is on the open market. That if you could, like just purchase one of these and purchase one of these modules, and then actually use it in that way, where the next time you go to a place and meet a bunch of people, that you could augment your ability and your memory with something like Google Glasses.
Not worried that's going to come across as creepy and ruin the social vibe. I guess people haven't been worried about that since the turn of the millennium. Remember going to
Like
a
a Facebook Office, and maybe like the type thing that if you were in like a technology geek type office where people were using it. So like if you actually work for like Facebook or something like that, and like people are walking around with it, um, how useful it would be to maybe in China or something like that, or like a different country that had a different social structure. That so even if you knew how to use this technology, that you would be able to successfully use it around other people who really have no idea. So just like, I'm a superwoman and I remember everything that everybody tells me, because like little do they know that my glasses is projecting a little screen that is telling me this information.
You really think that kind of tech would catch on? Don't people want some degree of privacy?
Yeah, to catch on and saying, if you're Jeff Bezos or something, if you're Ford and you employ tens of thousands of people, it's more important to you to know these things. Or if you do large operations, and the infrastructure, maintaining the infrastructure, say like in factories. So if you're run a factory and you need this information, and might be a little corny. So if you're like the foreman of a factory and you're walking around, and the person has one of these glasses, and they go over and like that that the person doesn't really know your name or doesn't know this stuff, and they're getting it from the computer, projected onto their glasses so that they could talk to you. um yeah, I said these things already exist, and so it might be a little bit corny, but it's for purposeful directed work. That if you're in a production plant or something like that, like if you're an Amazon facility, and the foreman comes up, and it's somewhat impersonal because the foreman doesn't really know who you are, but he has the information, uh, about you from the computer. So all this, so if you like, it is kind of, you could call it creepy, but it's just impersonal, and it's productivity based.
Daryl makes not an entirely horrible point when he says the more complicated, or wait, more advanced tech is, the easier it is to defeat or interrupt it. You agree with that? There's like more choke points. You can be overloaded with more complicated tech.
Um, I took all these courses. I actually, the Siemens conference is back this year. So the last few years I didn't go to the Siemens conference because COVID-19. But for years I went to the Siemens conference every year. Um, and I'm not sure about the Google glasses, but like the Internet of Things uh, has been active for years in an high output um, industrial facilities. They already use these things. And it's like all machines collect data and purvey that data. And so if you're running a factory, you could have like a little tablet that will be able to collect all the data from the different devices around. And for running a factory, that's extremely important. And these things have been around a while. And whether having a tablet or having like some sort of glasses embedded, so like the Google glasses or something. I'm not sure. I haven't really seen that, but I'm saying like the tablet with that information, including like employment information, that if you're like like at a Ford auto plant and there's 1,000 people working there, and you go to check on the device and the tablet tells you like the name, and or like even the Amazon facilities, and exactly the performance of the person from the computer, from the tablet, because the computer has measured it and will give you that data. So that's basically a given, because the computer collects the data, and then um, they'll create programs that will give the person the relevant data in a very clear, easy, efficient readout. And so like I'm an engineer. Um, all industrial facilities, newer facilities, already operate like that. They have every single machine has some sort of method that collects the data of what the machine did, and then will give that data over to some sort of central computer, and then there'll be a program that will have made that data useful for the people operating the facility, to put like some sort of human use for some sort of social use. It could be done. I think there is such things. They do exist, but I would say no. I mean, the direction of technology is mostly used for industrial facilities.
Direction of technologies for industrial facilities. So you're saying the glasses are going to be working in industrial facilities, not random parties? Where are you seeing the glasses giving people the edge? Just wondering.
And put in the chat. Here's the Siemens Manufacturing America conference in Detroit. So I'm going to sign up for that. Hopefully, I've actually streamed that in previous years. Well, I mean, the social implications are unclear, but like whether that's useful. I'm saying this like science geeks, tech geeks might design it, and it's saying that to create a device that you could sell and be useful. And maybe a few tech geeks have done and created, or if you work at some sort of like high tech facility, that someone computer geek guy would have one of those, versus industrial manufacturer facilities where it's useful, and they all have it. Like even construction sites that most expensive devices you have embedded RFIDs. So like like logistics, if you have a trucking company and all your trucks have some sort of RFID, and then you have some sort of central computer where you could look at a screen and see where all your trucks are. So like anybody who works for Amazon or something like that, they have this stuff. They use this stuff. They don't use it for social reason. They use it for logistic reasons. And from the pure technological perspective, data is the direction of technology. And there's newer devices, but most of the recent discoveries in technology has been data driven, where like your automobile, like to make the automobile better, uh, all of the various components of the automobile uh, is measured, and then they send that data to the central processor in the car, and then the car could operate more efficiently knowing all that data. And I mean, I don't know if that intuitively makes sense to you. That just the direction. Like historically, uh, you just had mechanical components that ran, but now you have mechanical components that run, and they measure themselves running, and they send the information of the measurements of themselves running to some sort of central processor, and that information allows better performance.
Adaptive modeling, what you're talking about, pretty much.
Yeah,
Adapting on the fly kind of thing. Training itself with novel data.
yeah, and especially for manufacture, where you have like reconfigurable manufacture. So if you have a line that has multiple dependencies, and that's measured um, for configuration purposes, that there's optimal performance based on configuration, and the optimal performance for many components depends on how the other components are running. So, like if some mechanical, if it's a speed, a frequency of one device is operating, that will change the optimal, uh, speed, frequency, or difference of other components. So just having that information leads to superior efficiency, and it could even be mechanically tuned, and then the information could be watched over by an engineer who would have some sort of screen that they would be looking at. And if it's like a nuclear power plant or something, but you're looking at hundreds of components that go together, and they're all operating under different machinery, and the information about the current level that the machinery is operating at will allow all of the other components to be fine-tuned to optimal performance.
I guess in my reasoning, there's always a point at which data overload sort of trumps the utility of the data. Like, worth having so much information if you're not, who don't know what its context is. It's just, oh, it's just there because we could get it. Fancy name
Well,
of that.
at this point, all devices basically record their own data and send that data somewhere to process it. Whether the data is relevant or not, or it's done or not, but like most machinery now is embedded with chips, and those chips will measure and the data, record the data, and send that data, and then that data could be processed. And whether there's something done with that information or not, depends. But a lot of times there is. And to embed a few dollar chip into a device, um, is basically the mainstream practice now for new devices over a certain value. So if you think like your typical device, like your refrigerator, your washing machine, your dishwasher, even your radio or something like that, there's a lot of mechanical information about how the device is running, how much power it's taking, any of the components, how fast it's running, uh, dynamic, like temperatures and various things, that you would just have a constant readout on this information. What's the temperature? What's the speed? What's the electrical input? And that would be sent somewhere to a processor that would record all that data. And that may change how other things are configured. So um, a manufacturer facility, you could just be recording all that data and be useful for knowing when parts are going bad or when they need to be changed, or for troubleshooting, or they could be directly used for configuration of the device. And one of the main drivers of these things, like energy efficiency. So if you have like an engine or something, or even a appliance in your house, if it's using excess energy, that that would be the main purpose of embedding these chips into household devices, is for energy efficiency. That if your device is using energy that it doesn't need to use in order to output the optimal function of it, then it will try to configure it in a way to use that less energy. as opposed to manufacturing facilities where there's actually configuration and efficiency and logistical issues um, that make a big difference. But also power usage also. So like even data centers, uh, like heat and cooling, and but like at this point, like every device self records what it's doing and then sends that data to some sort of central processor that records that data. And whether you could do something positive with that data or not doesn't change the fact that most devices now are built in a way that they record their own internal data and then send that to some sort of processor that could make use out of that data should there be use to make out of it. I mean, it's called the Internet of Things. I assume you've heard of it.
Sounds familiar. I'm not sure if I've looked into it too much.
And it, I mean, it could, like, God forbid, there, the global chip shortage, but I go to the automotive testing expo. I've shown on my channel some of these. Um, there's sensors, and they're not really expensive. It could be $1 or two. You could have a pressure, electricity, sound, temperature sensor, and it costs $1 or two. Or you could even have a multi-sensor chip that really just cost a few dollars. And so most expensive devices have these in them, and these sensors sense the data, and then they feed that data somewhere, especially in automobiles where the long-term I mean, do you have a car?
I am. Yes, I suppose. Sure.
You have, like, most cars have like lights on the dashboard that will come up like orange when there's some sort of danger, then like a red.
It's not that new. It does beep when you back it up, though.
I'm talking about your dashboard that
Those are
has.
pretty recent. That's a recent development, isn't it? It's like detecting. You're talking about the video feed from behind?
No, I'm talking about on your dashboard that there's a whole bunch of things that could go wrong with my car. For example, God forbid, thank God I finally got my car back. My electric throttle body had an issue, and that's when you hit on the gas pedal, uh, it's not mechanical, it's electric, that it sends an electric signal of how hard you push down on the gas, and then that controls how the gas release into the pistons. So I had a problem with it, and a light popped up on my sensor, uh, either orange or red, and then you look in the book and it tells you what that means. And if it's orange, it means there's a problem. If it's red, it means it's not working. But it's because there's an internal sensor and a computer.
Yeah,
board.
we have that for the engine, at
All
least.
cars have them from like even the 90s. And then if you go to an auto shop, you could plug in. So all cars have a central computer, and if you go to like the car mechanic, they'll plug something into your central computer, and then it'll give all that data, and then maybe they'll be able to determine what part of your car has problems because the data of the sensors on the various parts of your car, and they know the numbers like a doctor, if it's like your blood pressure or certain elements of how much of something should be in your blood, or something like that, that they read the device from the central computer of your car. And if the measurements on one of the devices isn't what it's supposed to be, there's probably a problem with that device. So I mean, I think most cars already from the 90s had this thing. And if that makes sense, if you remember taking your car to a mechanic and they plug some sort of device into your computer and then figure out what's wrong with your car or what parts isn't working right. But it's saying the computer doesn't say this part's not working right. The computer has sensors that measure various forms of output, and then there's the expected output, and when the expected output doesn't match the actual output, then from that they could determine um, likely that there's a problem in that part. In a similar way that a doctor might work, they run a bunch of tests. So a person is like, oh, like I'm in pain, and they run a bunch of tests, and the test measure um, various bodily outputs like blood pressure or certain blood tests or systolic pressure or something like that, and they um, just take a bunch of measurements until they find a measurement that isn't with the expected healthy measurement, and then from there they could have a likelihood that that you have a certain problem because the measurement in your body isn't the measurement that it should be.
Yep, very basic. Very basic. I guess an impedance test of some sort. Daryl says it's on a timer to turn orange. Not sure if that's a factor. It depends on the car. I'm far from a car expert.
Well, no, I'm saying it's because there's a performance measurement that doesn't, so if it's red, it means that it's in a way that you shouldn't operate your car. You should take it to a mechanic immediately. If it's orange, it is something that is causing your car to run inefficiently, but your car could still operate safely. Although, but so if your car has been, something in your car has been orange for years, it means it's not performing according to the standard, and whatever the data that's being measured is uh, is not optimal, and could mean that you're not getting as good of fuel mileage, or it could mean that there's danger in one of your parts, and that your car is not operating according to the way it should be operating.
Or that they just change their own oil and stuff and don't reset the light if it's on a timer.
No, he means the orange engine light. Not talking about the change oil light. I mean that.
Well, it's like
And
a check engine, which I guess maybe includes topping out the oil. I don't know. Again, I don't know
if
anything
your
about
car is
cars.
over 100,000 miles, there's a lot of things that could go wrong with your car, and there's a lot of performance issues that your car is not going to be performing as good as it should. Just like if you're getting older, or with age or health issues, that there's a lot of things with a person's body that aren't operating according to optimal, like high blood pressure or something like that. So just like you have high blood pressure, and you don't have like a check engine light, but if you have high blood pressure, you got an orange light. Most people have high blood pressure for the majority of their adult life. High blood pressure is extremely common. Like 20-30% of adults in America have high blood pressure, and but it's a measurement basis that when you go to the doctor, they measure it, and they look at their chart, and they'd be like, this is what your blood pressure would be if you were operating healthily. This is what your blood pressure is, and then the certain effects of this is what you could operate with your current level of unhealthiness. And so car is similar, that you have your light is yellow or orange because there's some sort of measurement that is not optimal. And if you took your car to a mechanic, they would be able to plug their device into your computer, and it would tell them exactly what is causing that signal, exactly what part of your car, what measurement is causing that signal. um,
Yep. Reminds me of the last time my car broke down.
but you didn't know
Pretty
what
bad.
caused. I mean, your car just broke down, but you didn't know what caused it. Then you took it to the mechanic, and they plugged it in, and then they told you, okay, this part's no good anymore, and has to be changed, and told you how much it's going to cost.
Some along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, it's like similar to a doctor, and they might have a feel or know just from your explanation, or from listening to the car, or the doctor might have a feel, but then they're going to run some tests, and their test, they're going to see they're basically going to take measurements, and they're going to see, compare the measurement versus optimal, what it should be. And when they found something that is out of whack with what it should be, then they could diagnose your problem. So in that way, like medicine and a car mechanic are very similar.
Wouldn't it be nice if that were true?
What is? I'm saying the
Well, I
the
guess what we consider the domain of medicine is not the same.
the problem solving process is the same. I'm saying that it's a different field, but the process of figuring out the problem and running diagnostic tests and comparing the diagnostics versus optimal performance uh, is the same with a car mechanic and a doctor.
That implies the human is just a car.
No, it doesn't imply that. It says the problem solving process is the same.
Okay.
There's no implications at all comparing a person to a car, just saying the problem solving process is the same. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with my car? Let's take a bunch of measurements and compare those measurements to what it would be under optimal performance. And once we find, these numbers that are different from optimal performance, then we can say the problem's probably there. So if you have your regular doctor's appointment, he takes your blood pressure and he takes your, all these various measurements. And, so if you're sick, not just like your regular appointment, but if you're sick and you can't, you could explain like, oh, I don't really feel that good, but I don't, really. So the doctor takes a bunch of measurements, and once he finds a measurement that doesn't, that is off of what it should be, that's the sign to the doctor that that's probably what's causing the sickness. And then there might be, verifying besides that, then there'd be more tests to verify it. And that problem solving procedure is the same thing a car mechanic would use. If your car is not working, they would run a bunch of diagnostics until they get a number of something that's operating not according to the way it should optimally be operating. And then once they say, oh, therefore it's probably this part, and then they would run further tests. And like a body's not a car, and you're not going to solve the problem in the same way, but the problem diagnostic process is the same. You take a bunch of measurements and you compare those measurements to what optimal measurements is, and you keep on taking measurements until you find something that's off with what it should be. Although the car is designed in a way you could just automatically does it for you. So there is no human body. You can't like you can't plug the cord into the human body and get all those signals. They have to run all the tests, as opposed to the car. The car has a central computer, and the mechanic could just plug it in and read all the numbers straight off and have the piece of information. Um, but there might be more that they have to run diagnostic tests further than that. But the human body doesn't have a central computer like that to plug into, so they have to just run a bunch of tests.
There is a central computer that you can plug into. It's called the mind. It's a quantum computer.
But you can't plug into the mind.
Yeah, you can.
Read all this data.
You can, but there's no reason it can't be done. You just need observables that are process independent.
You're saying theoretically, but I mean there is no.
No, practically and theoretically, it's been demonstrated you can get very high accuracy on process independent observables.
One thing that's not clear, I mean, if you're talking like for a medical purpose, like if you're talking, blood pressure.
I could tell someone's dosha and predict their behavior by association, whether they want me to or not.
Yeah, but that's the output of mind, not the body. So from a medical point of view, it's not the mind. You're talking about measurements of bodily performance, like blood pressure, heart rate, amounts of chemicals or things in the blood, the oxygen that the mind may or may not have a recording of, like as a car does. And so even if you could have some sort of quantum device that could read the mind.
If you could control the fundamental node of someone else's mind, surprise, that means all the other emanating nodes. You control those too.
But it's saying that the mind may or may not have that information that's useful to the doctor.
Well, if the doctor can't diagnose it, sure, but it's not like it's undiagnosable information. There's a long history of this type of information being diagnosed.
It's unclear whether it's saying that the mind has that. If the mind knows your heart rate, it might. Like if the mind may have some sort of measurement of your blood pressure or
The mind
of
sets the heart rate, so yeah. If the mind animates the body, then the mind sets the heart rate, doesn't it?
it's unclear that I mean, even without like a solution to the heart problem of consciousness of the setting of the heart rate, if that's performed from, so to say, the brain. I mean, you have an electric signal, and but to say whether the control, the process that determines the heart rate is connected to the brain, I'm not sure that there would be some sort of decision making process.
Well, no. The heart rate is the fundamental node, so it would control the body. Just more than the body would control it. But even that would only be a partial truth.
I mean, the feedback mechanisms, like how much blood gets pumped to the brain or oxygen.
Well, the brain is pretty passive in the whole consciousness process. Ironically, it's little more than a magnifying glass.
It could be controlled by glands.
I mean, think
that-
about consciousness as an astrophotography lab and the brain as a single lens. It's like, yeah, there's a lens in there, but it's not in any way generating the image. But the heart, because it has emotion, it's associated with the mind. That's how you know, because it has, well, the lungs and the heart, those are sort of easier to establish a spontaneous fluid motion. But I mean, obviously, I'm sure you agree you can establish fluid motion at and about the brain.
Well, just to the point that it's unclear whether the body has some sort of mechanism to record and like a value of these measurements. I mean, the body has feedback mechanisms mostly through the glands.
It's about whether you can get information out of someone else's mind, and the answer is it's trivially easy.
But it's saying whether this information is in the mind or not is unclear. The body
Only to you.
mechanisms. Well, I mean, you're just talking out of your ass, I mean, I don't even think you understand what I'm saying. That saying like the information that a doctor test and read that would be contained in the mind is unclear.
No, it's contained in the body. That's the whole problem. It's all body diagnostics.
Yeah,
Very
so
few
even
mind diagnostics.
to read the mind, that the mind would have that information in the same way that
You're like, maybe it's not there. It's like, yeah, it's there. People have been getting that information forever, so it's there.
no, I don't think it is. I mean, it's not
Okay,
like a
well,
mind's not like a computer. It's not like a car where there's sensors that record this data. The body has feedback mechanisms. It doesn't have measurement. So I'm saying you have that's not how the body operates. The body
The
has
body is a measurement device.
I don't think so.
Well, it's measuring light, isn't it? Through the eyes.
We're talking like sense perception, but in terms of the bodily function, the body has homeostasis and feedback mechanisms. It doesn't measure and set the level based on measurement. It has feedback mechanisms that operate naturally.
Based on observation, which is measurement.
No, it's not. I mean, there's no observation or measurement.
Except that it's all observations and measurements. Whole
No.
hard problem of consciousness thing.
Homeostasis and feedback mechanisms.
Which are effectuated through observations. Just a question of how does the observational power of light parse out things that, like chemical equilibrium.
Yeah, so you have chemical equilibriums when it's below a certain level, or when it crosses a certain threshold, it causes a bodily outcome. It's not like the body makes a measurement and then causes the body operate in a certain way. There's homeostasis and thresholds, and you're saying that the mind unlikely contains like numbers and information like this in the way a computer and sensors does.
Well, nobody said anything about numbers. It said observations.
I mean, say like what's your blood pressure? That the mind would contain your blood pressure is unclear.
The mind sets your blood pressure. Evidence: do deep breathing, mind controlling lungs. Indirect result: heart rate will diminish. Probably also pressure.
It is a feedback mechanism, but so to say that you would be able to read from the mind a number is unlikely. So if you had some sort of
Sure.
that you would
That's
be
why I
able to,
said process independent observables. Something like a number someone's holding in their head would not be a process independent observable. It's like an arising, fleeting impression, sort of not the kind of thing you'd have access to.
measurements that a doctor makes wouldn't be contained as information in the mind.
No, but the second time it's largely derived from the body. Almost nothing is mind derived. That doesn't speak to whether it could be mind derived, just whether it is. I'm just not sure, looking at this conversation in the chat, I'm just not sure that there is a computer metaphor that's all that accurate with regards to consciousness.
Okay, so I guess I'm gonna wrap up. So
Good show. Yeah, it went for 3 whole hours. Thanks for keeping it positive. I know that it's tough with the conflict and everything, and we'll keep saying prayers for that to end as quick as possible and have a stable civilization ASAP. Do you have any final words, Doovid? And also, thanks again for joining.
no, that's it. So I'll probably maybe I'll pop on Ralph's a few times this week if he streams talking about the war. Maybe tomorrow night I'll be on Jai Dave's talking about Jesus and Sanatana Dharma. Oh, I'm not sure. And Thursday morning, I'll have my guests talking about the similarities between the Hebrew prophets and Vedic traditions, stories. And
I put a link to that in the chat, or sorry, in the comments. I thought people should check that out. I definitely will. Looking forward to it.
Okay, so have a good week, and so you want to continue, feel free.
We'll see if the chat wants to throw rocks at my ideas. Just kidding. I didn't really get to my whole plan there. I don't want to have any unneeded friction there. So. Woo-hoo. I went on, I don't even know if I mentioned that I think I did, that I went on the Amy Newman channel last night, and it was fun, and briefly talked about evolution, but didn't really get into it too much. I mean, it's hard because how do you sort of hard to dial it back enough to make it make sense. Yeah, Daryl, your analogy for consciousness is shit. What a shock. Why the hell would anyone think they had any special insight with regards to consciousness is beyond me. Just the way I would explain it is, if you start to look at definitions of words, you realize they're self-referential. in the sense that they're defined within, like, for example, well, what's consciousness? Oh, it's awareness. Oh, what's awareness? Oh, it's consciousness. You could say that that's self-referential in the second degree. And when you're self-referential in the first degree, i.e., you're a complete tool with no self-awareness, Daryl, you say shit like length is a length. And think that that's somehow insightful. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but did I see you post something not entirely terrible that may actually be a step in the direction of getting a definition for distance that's not viciously self-referential? That has to do with the amount of time, perhaps, it takes light, perhaps, to, whatnot. I think it's this unknown distance, known speed of light. So flip it around, axiomatize the speed of light as constant. Distance is determined by time. Distance is a function of time that way. Oh, but then it's like, well, what about this relational arising between space and time? It's like, I don't care. 3 + 1. That's the whole basis of measurement. That's why I put it, That's why I keep coming back to it. This notion of what is a metaphysical primitive? It's like, well, if you explore that problem long enough, you realize that certain concepts, you can just divide those out and they're crap and they're not worth fuck all. Like, for example, a chair. In the sense that we're talking about this right now, a chair doesn't mean anything because it's not at what you might call metaphysically privileged. It doesn't have any. Its dependence arising is on our asses, for fuck's sake. So it doesn't have any the same meaning as something like consciousness. And how can you tell? All right, well, intuition. We're talking about a chair. You're not going to get much disagreement on definition. John, with something like consciousness, you're not necessarily going to get much agreement on definition. And that's your hint that you're dealing with a metaphysical primitive, aka something you can't really divide out. So consciousness is something that once you've got it in your formalism, you can't divide it out because it is sort of acceptable as a basis for all formalism. So if you slip it in your formalism, it's just going to chop all the stuff out that isn't actually it and just reduce to its fundamentality as a metaphysical primitive. Why do I think I have expertise on what consciousness is? I wonder. Perhaps something to do with practice. And perhaps also something to do with evidence. You dipshit. Obviously, there's more than one definition that would be admissible for consciousness. And the trick is, like, what's the problem with certain perspectives is that they make your head spin. Is that good? Well, no, the point of in my view, model is to stabilize perspective. That's the whole point of models, is they're synthetic constructs relative to the sort of ever-flushing toilet of reality, sort of give a perception of stability. Dog Pluto says they heard a funny definition of chair, something you sit on with a back. Yeah, so I talked about this a little bit a while ago, just basically like we can find a necessary definition for most things, like most mundane stuff we find necessary. We're not going to find a sufficient definition because the mundane things are subject to the same exclusion principle as everything else. Like there is no arbitrarily sufficient definition. But as far as necessity, it's like it's a chair if it's identified as a chair. Something like consciousness, just being identified as consciousness doesn't make it so, because it's something that we can't divide out the way we can divide out a chair. Like we don't have to deal with chairs all the time, but we do have to deal with consciousness all the time. We do have to deal with self, and we have to deal with mind. And those three things are interdependent. So in the English language, I could have just defined them any way I wanted and still been technically valid. Obviously, even more than that, but still be good for it to like match up to some extent with the colloquial definition if it can. It's not ever going to match up with, well, consciousness arises from the brain, because the sense in which that's true is very limited. I mean, even what I was talking about before, it's more accurate to say that consciousness arises from the heart and the brain, even though that's not accurate either. Yeah, so an image is not a model. Let's not get carried away just because, the term model is very exciting to use. Yeah, so Daryl, ever the prick, comes up. I was thinking, why don't I say this in my chair thing? Why don't I talk about it? And then I was like, I don't even need to, because I know some dickhead is going to say it already, so I won't need to. And Daryl proved me right. Thanks, Daryl. So, yeah, it's a communal thing. You being a weirdo who sits on trees and calls them chairs, that's just something that is only happening in your own perception. It's not making its way to the dictionary. There's got to be. You remember the whole democracy thing? This is where it actually applies. It's a chair because we use it as a chair in the sense that we, as the proverbial we, not you, we recognize it as a chair. So the trick with things that aren't chairs at all, that are actually metaphysical primitives, aka things that can't be divided out. So why can't you divide out consciousness? Well, because fundamentally 3 plus 1 is consciousness. You can make that argument that, well, what's being measured is a degree of consciousness, which is a degree of metaphysical, material manifestation of 3 plus 1ness. Okay, I'm not going to make that argument because I don't think that that actually helps people understand better, but I could. So it's unfalsifiable in my own model. Consciousness is, in my model, the process. Fundamentally, it's the process of waveform reduction. But then because you can have time crystals because of energetic saturation and quantization, then you can get, what amounts to semi-constant states. Mildly deviated, if you will. So that would be consciousness, is got waveforms, they're reducing everywhere. They tend to have a fixed a fixed volume and a changing area. So a reduction in one place would lead to an amplification somewhere else, which would be, your reasoning for that would be something called conservation of mind. Now, why don't I say conservation of consciousness? Because it's just too confusing. Consciousness is probably the most subtle one to, in my view anyway, understand, because it's self-moving. So it's like I'm identifying it as the movement associated with waveform reduction. So by dividing out one layer of consciousness, you diminish the movement, which is desirable because something's spinning. Don't want to accelerate something that's already spinning super fast. That's hard to follow. Want to slow it down, bring it into resolution at will. So consciousness, that's your basic process. Self is, just remember this, my self is not redundant. Objective truth, that's, I don't want to say redundant, but redundant at best. Myself, though, that's not redundant, meaning that there's such a thing as a self that is non-personal. And the way I would describe that is a generic ordering principle, i.e. the reason the QMPT is as it is. How do we account for the symmetry ordering principle? Now, subconscious here, you're talking about something essentially different. I'm simply talking about quantum mechanical waveform reduction, aka observation. Subconsciousness, aka like human subjectivity and what we're calling consciousness, it's not really the same generally. Like that, the fact of having a subconscious is locally true to living consciousness. Wouldn't be something you could establish, as far as I'm concerned, in this language as any more than that. All right, so what is consciousness? Reduction. So it's fundamentally a process, a geometric distortion of waveforms. Self is an ordering principle. But there's a perspective associated with that ordering principle, which is your own perspective, a unified perspective. So that oneness about human consciousness, that's self. Whereas mind is still essentially describing the same phenomenon, but it's from the perspective of the ordering principle, from the perspective of what is putting together the thing that you're ultimately experiencing as a single projection. So that's mind, is multiple selves seen from a single perspective, is more along the lines of what mind is. And self is more your own individual, single, unitary. The real difference is that self is from the perspective of the singular unification, whereas mind is more the broad vantage of the exact same thing. And then consciousness is what's relating all that together, aka making these different perspectives more like each other, is consciousness. Obviously, it's going to sound like a word salad. See, here's the thing I don't understand about the people you remind me of, Daryl. I've never seen any domain where people were this proud of being ignorant. That's a really big concern to me. I'm doing my best here to explain something that, and I don't expect anybody to walk away from this with a transcendental understanding of consciousness. What I'm hoping is for people to get a little closer to understanding maybe why these questions are so hard to understand, maybe how it's possible to start breaking down. Not those questions, not the fundamental questions, but questions that are maybe simplified versions. They're still really hard. At this point, not well understood. Tackling something easy. There's something to be said for doing something easy to build up your self-esteem. That's always good because you're in it, long term. That's the whole marathon thing versus sprint. That, and then, also banging out the stuff you don't want to do and leaving the stuff you do want to do till the end. That tends to work up the motivation. Memes, I have no clue in what sense this sounds like multiple truth hypothesis, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts at some point. Thanks for the video suggestion in terms of entanglement. I don't know what exactly I would say about entanglement. I mean, the way I understand, or like, what do you want me to take from this thing about entanglement? Like, entanglement is the action of mass on itself. It's just the basic substrate of self-connectedness. Entanglement is the easiest thing, in a sense, for me to understand. So to try to watch other people bungle through it is, honestly, I hate to say it, but painful. But yeah, like, I'm sort of reminded of this one experiment and talk about the speed of entanglement. And it's just so high. So it's just, to me, it's irresponsible to assert things like, oh, we measured the speed of entanglement, and then it's like many times more than the speed of light. And that not realizing that that's a contradiction of the predictions of special relativity, which is really well established as a theory, frankly. Not to be confused with general relativity, not well established at all. So I'll show what I'm thinking of. So this is just like ridiculous. It's, I don't know, whatever, but like, that's just not, uh, you know, those puzzles where it's like, well, this or this or this is wrong. You can't have CPT symmetry unless you have this, or this. This ought to be a red flag, I think. Here's a thought. Maybe if it's called entanglement, speed doesn't actually apply to it. Maybe speed is something derived from it. And so to attempt to turn around and sort of make it seem like it does, you get these weird results that would appear to contradict. I don't want to maybe go to that extent, but there's something that really would appear to be incompatible with special relativity to assert something like this. And somehow quantum entanglement is not subject to special relativity. That's weird. Now, just for those of you who don't know, special relativity is basically this idea that the speed of light is a constant, and it's the fastest rate that information can travel from one system to another. Oh, but now we've got what? Supposedly 3 trillion meters per second? So it says that's 4 orders of magnitude faster than light. So maybe like a red flag, alarm bell type thing ought to be going off. How do I entangle 2 photons? Well, I don't, because why the hell would I try to entangle 2 photons? You go ahead and entangle 2 photons and let me know how it goes. But to get the phenomenon of entanglement going, obviously there's the entanglement, there's mass, and that's entangled, which means gravity is instantaneous. Okay, big whoop, right? But then there's light entanglement. That's where it's actually interesting. And it's just important to maybe like decode it with understanding how it connects to phenomenon of non-locality, because entanglement and non-locality, those are not independent concepts. They can't be, because it's possible to essentially convey the same information. And in one sense, you're using the word entanglement, and the other one, you're using the word non-locality. So why is that a fact? Well, because if something is entangled, that's all one system, and the entanglement is taking place over a large, physical space. It's all one system. There's no separation between any parts of that system. That's entanglement. That's also non-locality. It's non-local within a range over which it's delocalized, aka the range of entanglement. Yeah, Daryl, I thought you were asking me to entangle 2 photons. It's like, why the hell would I entangle 2 photons when I can entangle, way more than that? What you're talking about in science, it's like, okay, that's kind of trivially easy, like phase locking photons. I think what's probably harder is getting it down and establishing that you're really only dealing with a single photon. And it's a bit of an issue. that photons don't have mass, and usually the manner in which things are established as being no longer divisible is through massive quantization. So anyway, if there's no more questions about my stuff and it's just a bunch of asshole, worthless trolling nonsense in the chat, I'll sign off for now. Really appreciate everybody, not Daryl, who, how do I do it, Daryl? Fuck you is how I do it. And if you think I'm ever telling you, you're delusional. But it's definitely doable. Lesson. What you think about me, not important. What I think about you, très important, if you ever want to learn anything from me, which clearly Daryl, through his actions, does not. Let that be a lesson.